This is LBC from Global, leading Britain's conversation with James O'Brien.
3 minutes after 10 is the time. So I want to make something absolutely... Good morning. But how rude of me. I do apologise. Good morning, by the way. I hope you had a lovely weekend. Anybody, myself included, who offers support, either tacitly or directly, to any proscribed group in this country is liable to arrest and prosecution. And Palestine Action is a proscribed group in this country. So either tacit or explicit direct support for that organisation on this programme, whether it's you or me, would open up a very real opportunity of arrest and prosecution. So to be absolutely clear, I am not going to be doing that today. I am, of course, going to continue to express support for the people of Palestine and pleas for what they're worth, prayers even, that Benjamin Netanyahu turns away from his path of yet more carnage, just as I can offer support for the people marching in London this weekend calling for the remaining hostages to be released at the very first opportunity without running any particular risk of prosecution or arrest. And that is the law as it stands. But something rather unfortunate has happened. There's a little clip of Yvette Cooper speaking to Nick Ferrari last week that we should probably refresh our memories with, because she's not having a good one, is she, really, Yvette Cooper, in so many ways at the moment. Her and Keir Starmer often seem to be announcing policies completely at odds with the positions that they held in opposition. And I mean, it's possible that they were being inauthentic in opposition and the real Cooper and Starmer are standing up now. But it seems highly unlikely. And this is, look, it could be completely honest, this. But it could also be quite disingenuous, as in the reason why this organisation is proscribed is really serious, but it goes to a different school. I can't tell you at the moment the full reason why it is proscribed, because all we know about them is that they fired paint into the engines of some aeroplanes, and some members of the organisation are being prosecuted accordingly. Before I play you the clip of Yvette Cooper speaking to Nick Ferrari last week, I just want to read you an extra... How many times have I said to you that the letters pages occasionally throw up the most interesting contributions to public discourse? And someone else pointed out to me that, of course they do. It's the print equivalent of what we do every day. How often is a caller considerably more interesting than the presenter, for example, on LBC? Even on this show. I mean, especially on this show. And the answer is almost always. You know, we get callers sometimes who open up avenues we didn't even know existed, let alone we had simply missed. And the reason for that, of course, is the things that we laud most together every morning, which is insight, expertise and experience. Slightly at odds with the traditional phone-in format, where none of those things are historically valued, but here we value them very highly. Just as Wing Commander Andrew Brooks chose to write to the Times today, so he could quite easily have rung us. Just listen to this letter to the Times, published this morning. The Home Secretary, sir, must get the etiquette correct. Sir, he writes, if the Times was edited by a woman, I don't think it ever has been edited by a woman. The Sunday Times was edited by a woman. She edits the Wall Street Journal now, Emma Tucker, absolutely brilliant journalist. Would it be Madam? Did anyone notice when the Sunday Times was edited by a woman? Did they change it to Madam on the Sorry, I'm getting distracted. Sir, the Home Secretary proposed to ban Palestine Action on the ground of unacceptable criminal damage, that's in quotes, after they infiltrated RAF Bryce Norton. That's the event I was just referring to. And this is where Wing Commander Brooks brings experience, expertise and evidence to bear. In the 1980s, he writes, and I don't know why, I am envisioning a handlebar moustache when I read the words Wing Commander. I'm sure I'm doing him a grave disservice. In the 1980s, when I was UK commander of the RAF Greenham Common Cruise Missile Base, so I think we can say he knows of what he speaks. I had a £250,000, and this is in the 1980s, annual budget to repair damage done by peace protesters to the perimeter fence. We had a strong Ministry of Defence police presence to stop intruders, often in a rather Benny Hill fashion. Another mental image conjured up rather splendidly there. The intruders were left in no doubt. So if you don't remember this, or you're too young to know, the peace camps that were largely populated by women and grew up on the environs, on the outskirts of the Greenham Common camp, in protest at the nuclear warheads that were stored there, the US nuclear warheads that were stored there, became, almost folklore. Such was their status and success wouldn't be quite the right word, but prominence, that it is hard to think of anything that stands comparison with it. The intruders were left in no doubt that if they tried to infiltrate the secure storage area with its 96 nuclear warheads, they would be shot by US Air Force military police who were a mean crowd. And here's the clincher. There were thousands of such protesters, quotes, threatening, end quotes, the base, but their freedom of speech was always respected, and I never heard anyone in Whitehall or the Pentagon suggest that they should be classed as terrorists. Now, if your gut reaction, your gut position is to balk at this behaviour by Yvette Cooper and the Labour government, or the opposite, to think that the authorities must know what they're doing, I just refer you to Wing Commander Andrew Brooks and his understanding of some of the issues. But he's not definitive. He's certainly not infallible. It may be that there are reasons why the government persists in its position. And I don't mean that glibly. It is, perfectly feasible that when Yvette Cooper explained the situation to Nick Ferrari last week, she was absolutely telling truths that she cannot share in further detail at this point.
The prescribing process is based on very extensive security advice and security assessments to me as Home Secretary, which I have to take immensely seriously. That security assessment looks at the violent attacks, injuries, attacks on national security infrastructure, and also includes assessment and some really troubling information about that refers to future attack planning as well. That's the basis on which this organisation has been prescribed. And let's be clear, this is a narrow organisation. This is not about protesting about Palestine, which huge numbers of people lawfully do. I understand there are people who don't really know the details of this organisation, who may be thinking about protesting, but who don't know. What I would say to them is more information is likely to be revealed about this organisation as various trials go through the legal system, and really this is not a non-violent organisation.
And that, of course, puts everybody in a slightly difficult position. I, for the record, believe Yvette Cooper when she says we will find out more about this organisation in the fullness of time. And if she suggests that what we will find out speaks to violence, then, conscious of contempt of court laws and the difficulty of discussing live cases, I would also be minded to think that the Home Secretary would be very, very foolish, dangerously misguided to mislead us on that front. But 521 people were arrested this weekend for displaying placards in support of this group. If the argument is that if they knew more about this group, then they wouldn't have done it, then it's very hard to see on what side of this particular fence right and wrong lie. That was at a Palestine Action gathering in Parliament Square outside Westminster, and one was on a march. That's 521 people, 147 of whom were aged between 60 and 69. In fact, how surprised would you be to learn that the average age of the people arrested was older than me? The average age of the people arrested was 54. Which, I don't know, the way I said that made it sound like a Paul Hardcastle sequel, but it's highly unlikely that he's going to be setting this these particular numbers to music anytime soon. It is the largest number of arrests made by the force, made by the Metropolitan Police on a single day in the last 10 years. And the counter-terrorism team is now working on bringing charges against those accused of supporting Palestine Action. And the arrest was simply for holding a message. I shall read the paragraph, the relevant paragraph to you from the BBC's coverage. The protest, organised by Defend Our Juries, saw hundreds of people simultaneously pull out placards with the message, "I oppose genocide, I support Palestine Action," when Big Ben chimed at 1 o'clock British summertime on Saturday afternoon. 521 arrests. It's not an invitation for you to tell me whether or not you think they deserve it or whether or not they knew what was happening. They categorically did. Make no mistake, this was a deliberate act, not of provocation necessarily, unless you want to see it like that. But this was the intended outcome, because I think I can say with confidence that what this was designed to do was highlight the perceived absurdity of the proscription. So I turn to the comment pages of Rupert Murdoch's Times, and Rupert Murdoch's newspapers historically very supportive of Benjamin Netanyahu's administration in Israel, which is in many ways the target of the ultimate goal of these protesters. And they have written today the headline, "Wrong Proscription. Palestine Action is a criminal menace and deserves to be punished, but designating it as a terrorist group was a mistake that risks furthering its squalid agenda." There is criminal damage. There are cases waiting to be heard, and therefore I'm a little bit reluctant to go into too much detail. But what has happened here is that the government has allowed a really tricky conflation to essentially go unchallenged. And the conflation is this. The first bit of that placard, "I oppose genocide," has become synonymous with the second bit of that placard, "I support Palestine Action." What if 20,000 people had turned up with identical placards? What if everybody on a Palestinian solidarity march through the streets of London elected to pull this placard out of their knapsack at the same moment? The police, I mean, we're already living with a post-Tory criminal justice system in which we can't put people on trial, and even if we could, we've got nowhere to lock them up if they're convicted of serious crimes, until we actually release some people who've previously been convicted of crimes early. Of course, if you read the Daily Mail, that's all Labour's fault. You can't contain this. Metropolitan Police officers have said that quelling the protest was an unrealistic task. Scotland Yard has said it faced entirely unrealistic challenges in policing a protest in support of Palestine Action at which more than 500 people were arrested. So 16 minutes after 10 is the time. Quite a few of you wondering what's happened to all the people who've been shouting about two-tier justice and threats to freedom of speech in recent months. People who are talking absolute bilge. There is no two-tier justice from their perspective, and there is no threat to their freedom of speech, because it's very hard to get any of them to shut up for 10 seconds. But here is an incredible threat to freedom of speech. Don't take my word for it. Take Wing Commander Andrew Brooks, former UK commander of the RAF Greenham Common Cruise Missile Base, when he describes how there were thousands of protesters threatening his base, but their freedom of speech was always respected, and I never heard anyone in Whitehall or the Pentagon suggest that they should be classed as terrorists. But I think he might be wrong. I think that this conflation is the key to this conversation, and it seems to me that in the absence of full detail of what Palestine Action members are accused of doing and set to be prosecuted for doing, conflating "I oppose genocide" with "I support Palestine Action" is a mistake. The problem is that if tens or thousands, hundreds of thousands of people make the same mistake, and that mistake constitutes a crime, there is next to nothing that the authorities can do about it. So, I don't think this is necessarily a freedom of speech issue. I think it's bad governance, and I think it's appalling communications from the government, and I think the decision to proscribe Palestine Action, according to the currently available facts, was a mistake. But if the facts change, sir, I change my mind. And until we know all the facts that Yvette Cooper alluded to in that interview with Nick, I don't know that anyone can, in good conscience, come out and say that they support the organisation, because they don't know what they are professing support for. So, 0345 6060 973 is the number you need to tell me very, very simply how this story makes you feel. Okay, I would remind you again that you will be liable to being arrested and prosecuted if you tacitly or directly offer any support to any proscribed group. We can, however, have a conversation about whether or not this group should be proscribed. You just can't tell me that you support them. I don't think they should be proscribed according to the currently available facts, and I therefore don't think that these people should have been arrested. But if it is a proscribed group, then it is quite right that they are arrested. So tell me how this story makes you feel. Could it be that those of us who are desperate to see Benjamin Netanyahu dissuaded from pursuing yet more carnage in the Gaza Strip can also say that this is not quite the cause célèbre that it is being presented as in some circles? And I want to tell you something else as well. As long as we don't flirt with support for a proscribed group, I'm absolutely here to be told that I'm wrong today. The problem I've got is really simple. If the Home Secretary is saying you don't have all the facts, I do, and I've proscribed them, then shouldn't we be sitting on our hands and confining our placards to the simple statement, I oppose genocide, without offering public support for a proscribed group? That's how it works. You know, that's how our criminal justice system works. That's how our intelligence services work. That's how counter-terrorism works. They don't tell us everything. They don't want some sort of Tim Pot Farage type character popping up and claiming that they're keeping things from us. I'm just asking questions. Sometimes you kind of have to trust the people in charge. And sometimes when you trust the people in charge, it turns out that you were wrong to do so. But what does this story say to you in 2025? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Because if they are proscribed and you express support for them, you are going to be arrested. If they are proscribed for reasons we are not aware of, we don't really know whether they should be proscribed or not, although the Times today is adamant that they shouldn't be. Designating it a terrorist group is a mistake, according to the Times leader page, that risks furthering its squalid agenda. All of these things can be true at the same time. But what do you make? Everyone's got a view on this. What's yours? 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. It's 10:21.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 23 minutes after 10 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So there seems to be a broad consensus that proscribing Palestine Action as a terrorist group was a mistake, but that the actions undertaken by some of the members of the group, which was founded in 2020, are categorically criminal damage and that the culprits should be punished accordingly. I can't help thinking that the ghost of Greenham Common looms rather large over this conversation, which is why I began it by reading out the letter to the Times today from the man that used to run that base, was the UK commander of that base in the 1980s. Annie's in Carnforth. Annie, what would you like to say?
Oh, hi, James.
Hello.
Well, talking of Greenham Common, I used to go to Greenham Common on a regular basis in the 1980s, and 4 of the women there broke into the base and attacked one of the planes with hammers. Now, they got 6 months for that. It was criminal damage, but as the Brigadier General, or whatever his name was...
Wing Commander, retired.
Oh, sorry, Wing
Carry
Commander. Yes. You know, they weren't classed as terrorists, and this country has a long history of non-violent direct action. You know, the Chartists, the suffragettes. Actually, the suffragettes were far more violent than this group.
I get confused. Which were the violent ones, the suffragettes or the suffragists?
The suffragettes.
The suffragettes were the ones that would be engaging in direct action.
Yes, yes. And so we have a long history of this, and my concern is that it makes me feel that this prescription, that we're living in an increasingly authoritarian state, and that this is the slippery slope on an attack on our civil liberties, on our right to free speech. And so, I mean, I just feel, who's going to be next? What group is going to be next to be prescribed? Could it be one of the environmental groups that might do criminal damage?
It's all a bit Suella Braverman, isn't it? And I don't think we were expecting that from Yvette Cooper.
No, I absolutely was not expecting it from the Labour Party. But then there's been lots of things this Labour Party have done that I haven't been expecting them to do.
What about the argument that she has made, and that we must at least respect, that if you knew everything, Annie, then you'd agree that it was right to proscribe this group as terrorists?
Well, they ought to tell us everything then. And I don't trust them, actually. And I think things will come out.
Weapons of mass destruction happened under a Labour government.
Exactly. Things will come out during this judicial review, which is coming up in November. And then I think we will see more of what's been going on. Part of that case, the case that is being brought against the government, is that due process wasn't followed with this prescription, that Palestine Action themselves and civil liberties groups weren't consulted. The people they did consult was the Israeli ambassador and Elbit Systems. Elbit Systems are an Israeli arms company who manufacture weapons in this country, which are being used in Palestine, in Gaza, and this is why the group were attacking them in particular. So those people were being consulted and not.
I don't know that. I don't know that, and I look forward to the judicial review to find out more. They claim £7 million worth of damage was inflicted, and bearing in mind that we can't say anything that might sway a jury in a forthcoming trial. But that is, I think, one of the most serious breaches of a military establishment on British soil. But as you point out, if you can attack an aeroplane with hammers at Greenham Common and get locked up, feel the full force of the law, but not be charged with terror offences, it's quite hard to see why these cases are being handled differently, except, as you've kind of, I think, quite diplomatically alluded to, except in the context of a political subtext, in the context of messages being sent to certain people that were not sent to the protesters at Greenham Common.
Yeah, I think this is totally political. This is why I think it's so dangerous. I think it's trying to... well, it is having a chilling effect.
Well, it's not, though, is it? It's having the opposite effect, actually, because that's what the 521 arrests have proved this weekend. 532 arrests this weekend. It may have been designed to I don't think it was. I think we can agree to disagree about that. I think this is a massive misstep, and whether or not it's been undertaken for the reasons you allege, or whether or not it is, which is often the case with Occam's razor, just miscalculation and incompetence, I don't know. We will hopefully find out one day. But I don't believe that the government has tried to quell pro-Palestinian voices in this case. And in fact, latterly, they've been describing Netanyahu's latest plans in the strongest of terms, so that simply isn't true. They're not going down the Braverman route of labelling everybody who marches in solidarity with the Palestinian people as being a supporter of Hamas or a sympathiser of terrorism or a forgetter of the hostages, but they have allowed this conflation to get halfway around the world before the truth, whatever the truth turns out to be, has got its trousers on, and it seems to me to be a huge mistake. And I keep going back to the Times, not because I trust them more than I trust Annie or you or me, but because if Rupert Murdoch's Times is saying that proscribing them as a terrorist group was a mistake, then it is simply not the case that is a position held only by the usual suspects or dodgy lefties like me and Annie. It's not the case. It's Rupert Murdoch's Times saying that they shouldn't have been proscribed as terrorists, and if you're not going to pay any attention to them, then I wonder whether you are actually approaching the subject with an open mind at all. 10:30 is the time. How does this story reach your ears? 0345 6060 973. Thomas Watts has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
33 minutes after 10 is the time. Something else I'd point you towards is a rather good piece by the rather splendid journalist Alan Rusbridger in Prospect magazine, which he edits, pointing out that not that long ago, Keir Starmer, as a human rights lawyer, defended direct action on grounds of conscience, and now he describes people undertaking direct action on grounds of conscience, or people who would claim that is what they were doing, as terrorists. Alan wrote this in late June of this year. 2 days before the missiles started raining down on Baghdad in March 2003, Josh Richards packed a mixture of petrol and washing up liquid into his rucksack and headed off to RAF Fairford in Gloucestershire. His plan was to set fire to the wheels of a B-52 US Air Force bomber to prevent it from joining in the imminent shock and awe. He was caught before he could act, but he was not the only person planning a last-ditch attempt to hinder a war which many considered illegal. Today, all 5 of the people that Rusbridger identifies in the first 2 paragraphs of this article would be labelled terrorists. And then they were not. In fact, among the barristers who came up with the defence was a rising star of the human rights bar, stepped forward Keir Starmer QC, who took the case on behalf of Josh Richards all the way to the House of Lords, where the presiding judge praised the erudition involved. The appeal was not totally successful, but in his judgment, Lord Hoffman articulated a humane view of how in the UK he believed we have traditionally regarded such acts of protest. So, the proscription of Palestine Action, which you categorically cannot offer support for on this programme, or indeed anywhere in this country, without being arrested and possibly prosecuted, was it stupid? Was it sinister? Or was it sensible? 0345 6060 973. Nick's in Lambeth. Nick, what would you like to say?
Hello, James. Stupid, sinister or sensible? I go with stupid and probably a little bit of sinister.
Go on.
I think, to quote you, you jumped in before me,
right.
A massive misstep.
Yes.
I mean, I think I would take... I think a state has got a right... quite correctly to protect defence establishments and to take a breach of defence perimeter very, very seriously.
Yes.
But we have plenty of laws that can deal with that, and to bring in terrorism, it feels like a clunking fist to the state smashing on people who, as far as one can see, are not a danger to the state or a danger to people.
Just to property.
Yes.
Just to inanimate objects. I mean, in fact, the defence that Keir Starmer and his colleagues came up with back then for the Fairford Five was that the actions were justified morally and legally because they were aimed at preventing a greater evil, namely, in that case, the war in Iraq and its probable consequences. So they were willing to commit crimes in order to prevent greater crimes, but there was no suggestion that they were terrorists.
Yes, of course, Keir Starmer, I mean, he was a barrister and he was defending people and he was producing a very good and effective defence. I wouldn't hold that against him now. I wouldn't say he's being contradictory because he was doing his job. The cab rank
principle, meaning that he argues whatever case lands in front of him as a human rights lawyer.
Well, partly that and partly I'm sure he had a lot of sympathy with what he was arguing at that time.
I think so.
The other thing you said, which maybe pricked my ears up, James, particularly from you, is... I'm sorry if I misquote. It was something like, the establishment have decided this and we've got to trust them. You said something like that. Until
the further facts emerge. If Yvette Cooper is saying there are some facts that will change your view on this, then you have to respect, at least in the short term, the possible existence of those facts. That's all.
Yes.
I also mentioned weapons of mass destruction in my defence as an illustration of how you can't. It's a very clicky phone line, Nick. I don't know why, but just if I may nudge you towards your sweeping point.
Yes. My sweeping point. I think, as you say, it was a massive misstep.
Yeah.
I think And the argument, I would say, about, we know things that you don't. Well, any authoritarian state can use that argument.
That's a really good point. In fact, I'm going to play it again, partly because I need to wash my ears of that irritating clicky noise, which is categorically not your fault, but I've got earphones on, most people haven't, and partly because it does seem to me to be, the more we think about it and the more people like Nick dissect it, at the very least, potentially disingenuous, shall we say.
The prescribing process is based on very extensive security advice and security assessments to me as Home Secretary, which I have to take immensely seriously. That security assessment looks at the violent attacks, injuries, attacks on national security infrastructure, and also includes assessment and some really troubling information about that refers to future attack planning as well. That's the basis on which this organisation has been prescribed. And let's be clear, this is a narrow organisation. This is not about protesting about Palestine, which huge numbers of people lawfully do. I understand there are people who don't really know the details of this organisation, who may be thinking about protesting, but who don't know. What I would say to them is more information is likely to be revealed about this organisation as various trials go through the legal system, and really this is not a non-violent organisation.
We do know quite a lot about them. They are estimated to have engaged in about 300 acts of increasingly violent criminal damage, founded in 2020 by activists with roots in Extinction Rebellion. Their campaign, their self-described campaign to, quotes, destabilise the Zionist project, end quotes, has escalated since Hamas's attacks on Israel on October the 7th of 2023. In a series of occupations of factories linked to Israel, they have smashed up machinery, broken windows and ceilings, and engaged in aggravated trespass. Last year, an activist from the group filmed themselves slashing a painting of Arthur Balfour at Cambridge University, and in August 2024, in a late-night attack on a factory in Bristol and armed with whips and axes, activists caused £1 million worth of damage, assaulting employees who tried to intervene and attacking 2 police officers with sledgehammers. So, and then we come to the attack on RAF Bryce Norton that was the source of the proscription, at least chronologically. 2 refuelling tankers spray-painted and other aircraft attacked with crowbars, inflicting £7 million in damage, according to their estimates. And there it is. Should we be using the word terrorist instead of the word activist? Many people, up to and including the bloke that used to run Greenham Common in the 80s, whose letter to the Times this morning I've read out to you already. If you missed that, you can use Global Player, of course. You can use the LBC app to rewind live radio. It's tricky, right? And there it is. Sinister, stupid, or sensible. I don't think, I'd be interested to hear someone try and use all 3 of those, but I think it's going to be 1 or 2 of those blended together. The last caller, Nick, I think went for stupid with a side order, a potential side order of sinister. Andrew's in Fakenham. Andrew, what would you like to say?
Hi there, James.
Hello, Andrew.
I guess really my point is the security assessment should start with the assessment of how they managed to get into Bryce Norton in the first place and cause the damage. The government seems to have been extremely quiet on all of that. We've heard nothing from the Ministry of Defence that I've heard explaining away how that could possibly have happened. And then talk of the damage that was inflicted on the planes. It's fine, but those planes would be undergoing maintenance anyway on their engines and stuff, so probably an inflated figure that's being used.
Well, it's not either or, is it? The proscription can sit alongside a robust investigation into how on earth they managed to get into these buildings in the first place. But
which isn't happening, is it?
I presume. I imagine it is, mate.
There's no mention.
Well, there wouldn't be with that. I'm sure people are being hauled over coals at Bryce Norton in the immediate aftermath of what went on. There'll be all sorts of people having to answer for their failures and their actions that day. So I don't think they're mutually exclusive. If I push you towards my incredibly lazy and glib distillation of this complicated story, stupid, sinister, or sensible? The proscription. The proscription.
Stupid, but stupid erring on unthinking.
And really stupid because it leaves the door open to sinister.
Yeah. I mean, I don't see that you can be arresting up to 400 odd people, and then say, and we'll tell you later why we've done it. That errs on the sinister.
Yes, that bit does, and that really does, and that's why Annie earlier used the word, I think, authoritarian. It really does err on the sinister. We're locking you up for reasons that you're not currently aware of. But that is the nature of proscription, isn't it? They don't have to provide chapter and verse on why they've done it. Chris would disagree in Leicester. When you sabotage defensive aircraft, rendering them unusable, that is an act of terror. It wasn't just spraying paint, it was decommissioning. The people protesting are conflating the right to protest with supporting a proscribed group. It was not a mistake to proscribe them. That's such an interesting message, Chris, who adds a PS just to stir things up even further. I was at Greenham, although you don't say in what capacity, Chris. You might have been there to bang heads together of protesters. But I can agree with one sentence and then disagree with the next one. I don't think it is an act of terror. But I do think it was more than simply spraying paint. And I also think people protesting this weekend are conflating their right to protest with support for a proscribed group. So I agree with that sentence, and then I disagree with your last one, that it was not a mistake to proscribe them. I told you it was tricky. Jill's in Stroud. Jill, what would you like to say?
I think you've been referring... Thanks for having me on, by the way, James.
You're very welcome.
You've been referring to this Times article in which, we say Murdoch referred to this as a mistake. I think he's actually accusing them of making a tactical error and kind of letting the side down. And because within that article, I think you quoted that the writer said that Palestine Action has a squalid agenda without any support for
the sub-editor. Sorry, go on. I think that's the sub-editor. That's maybe, and it's a leader writer, so it doesn't have a byline on it. But yes, that is on the page. That phrase.
Yeah, you know what I mean.
But it can be. I mean, you can say someone's got a squalid agenda, but they don't deserve to be proscribed as terrorists.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think the proscription is ridiculous. It's bonkers. It's a massive overstep. It's not something we would have hoped for from this government, which is, the Labour movement arose as a movement of protest. And you just said, yourself, something about we're conflating terrorists with activists. I think there are powers that would love us to do that and consider any activism as terrorism. And we know that people like Wolney have lobbied for that, for just
people like
oil,
who? People like who? Lord Wolney.
Lord Wolney was the so-called independent advisor to the previous government on protest, and we know it's a fact, it's been factually checked, that he's a lobbyist for the arms industry and for the oil industry. I don't know that I'm just nervous that I haven't got the evidence for those claims directly in front of me, and I don't know that they're necessary to this, to the point that you're making. The line in the article that I think you would be encouraged by is that they say the dubious decision to elevate Palestine Action to the rank of groups such as Hamas and al-Qaeda risks lending unearned legitimacy to the perception that pro-Palestinian political speech is being curbed. That's my worry. Yeah, me too. And I think that's part of, in a way, I think Yvette Cooper has sort of shot herself in the foot.
Yeah.
Because what Palestine Action have been opposing is our government's complicity in what's happening in Gaza. And if we have to go back with this talk has almost divorced itself from the horrific things that have been happening there. And what we're doing is we're criminalising those with some of the most moral courage who are prepared to stand up and say,
but we're not, are we? Because if the placard had simply said, I oppose genocide, then nobody would have been arrested. So it is simply expressing support for an explicitly proscribed group that has caused the arrests. And I don't know that
it was deliberately challenging that proscription and exposing it to ridicule, as Papaya does, and showing this is ridiculous, this is untenable, it's not workable, and all these people who are expressing concern about these horrific things we're seeing are clearly not terrorists. And they're just saying it's not okay. We need to focus this discussion on what's happening in Gaza.
I think I completely agree with you. And I want to find out more about the Al Jazeera journalists who've been killed in Israeli airstrikes in the last couple of days, and we will do so on this programme. But, I mean, do you think then... I may have misunderstood you, and this thought hadn't actually occurred to me, that we have... I'm not for a minute suggesting that anything you've told me isn't true, by the way. I'm just saying that I haven't got the wherewithal in front of me to confirm or challenge what you've said. But is there an argument that this protest this weekend may have accidentally done more harm than good? Because we're all talking about Palestine Action instead of talking about Gaza.
No, I don't think so. I think it probably hasn't highlighted, well, the media, the discussion on the media as a result of it hasn't necessarily highlighted what's happening in Gaza, but I think that highlights itself daily in a horrible way. But I think, no, it hasn't, because I just feel that this proscription of Palestine Action puts us at the top of a very, very slippery slope.
Yeah, I think you're right.
To who gets proscribed next, who gets proscribed next.
That's the
and
point.
It has to be opposed. It has to be questioned, really.
It does, and you can feel the full force of the law for the actions allegedly undertaken by the members of Palestine Action. You know, as earlier callers have told us, people who undertook similar acts at Greenham Common. In fact, as the former UK chief of the entire base, the cruise missile base there, has told the Times this morning in a letter. You can absolutely go to jail, you can be punished, you can have a £250,000 annual budget to repair the damage that they have done to the perimeter fence alone. But you don't have to class them as terrorists. So that's the kicker line. There were thousands of such protesters, quotes, threatening, end quotes, the base, but their freedom of speech was always respected, and I never heard anyone in Whitehall or the Pentagon suggest that they should be classed as terrorists. But if they had confined themselves, where I depart with the retired wing commander slightly, if they had confined themselves to the message, I oppose genocide, well, two things would have happened. A, nothing. No one would have been arrested. And B, nothing. I.e., we probably wouldn't be talking about it today. Well, we might, but people like Suella Braverman would be queuing up to accuse them of all manner of unpleasantness, just as she did when people first started marching in solidarity with the people of Gaza, with the Palestinian people. It's 10:49.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 10:52, and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Let me read you this from Roger, and then we will go to Francesca in Billericay, and following that to Hazel in Angus. Thank you to everybody contributing today. It's an interesting conversation, but of course it is one that is slightly pregnant with the knowledge that the Home Secretary says there is more information to come. Roger writes, I'm very much on the fence. On the one hand, we're on a sticky wicket. Can you be on the fence and on a sticky wicket at the same time, Roger? Surely you're mixing your metaphors mischievously. Because people support all sorts of political groups, including political parties, without knowing all their plans. Does that mean we shouldn't support them? If I've understood your question correctly, I can answer no. It's just groups proscribed as terrorists that you can't support without getting arrested. Whether you morally can or can't or should or shouldn't support them is one thing, but I do not support any proscribed terrorist groups. But I also support my freedom to ask the question of whether that group over there that I don't support should be proscribed. Nuance is everything. The big problem, writes Roger, is that many people don't trust our government and police anymore. I now instinctively don't trust the Met or the Home Office. Perhaps that's harsh, but having seen them behave with little regard for justice, that is my feeling. I don't know. Francesca is in Billericay. Francesca, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thank you so much for having me on.
You're very welcome.
So I actually attended the protest at the weekend and completely appreciate I'm not here to comment on what sort of action I do and don't support.
Okay, thank you.
In terms of the group itself, but I witnessed an 86-year-old being arrested, I think, and the effect in the sort of coming days emotionally has been way more profound than I thought it might be.
Oh, really? On you?
Sorry?
On you, the effect on you.
Yeah, obviously you go to these sort of events and you expect you might feel some sort of emotional reaction, but yeah, it's been a really quite profound effect over the coming days. And I think for me, it's really made me think about A, intent, and B, what is a proportionate response in that sort of scenario. And also the extent to which sort of symbolic support as well should be considered terrorism.
Yeah, I mean, that's really interesting, isn't it? Because the placard that 81-year-old would have been carrying contained both. It contained support for the Palestinian people. It contained opposition to genocide, which for some people is still a controversial depiction. It's a controversial word, but there is nothing to stop people from holding up placards saying I oppose genocide, or from shouting it from the rooftops. But the second bit on the arrested person's placard was not offering up support for the people of Palestine. It was something quite different. But was it different enough? No, I was interrupting you. Was it different enough for a terrorist proscription? And I think I sense you think not. I think most people probably think not.
So the difference for me, again, it comes back to a matter of intent.
Yeah.
Was there any incitement of violence? Because this 85, I think the woman that I met was actually 85, 86, but along with 500 others, when I saw them, were sat in silence. There is no incitement of violence in that scenario. And for me, that's what really makes this situation particularly distinct from what we might have seen in previous cases. I think
nicely put.
The second people start inciting violence, that's a bit of a different conversation.
Stupid or sinister? The proscription?
I think a bit of both.
Yeah.
Stupid initially.
And opening the door to sinister, which makes it even stupider than it was already.
Yeah, exactly.
And there is a problem they've got, which becomes a very political problem. And I think, you know, we're okay talking about it on one day for 1 hour, but I would rather be talking about what is going on in Gaza and what Benjamin Netanyahu, despite the disapproval of pretty much the entire world except Donald Trump, seems determined to do next. But I think it would be a mistake to accuse the people you've just described, the people who were arrested in their 80s. I mean, the average age was 54. 147 of the people arrested were aged between 60 and 69. And as Francesca has just reminded us, some of them, of course, will be even older. I don't think it would be fair to accuse them of following anything this weekend except their consciences, although, as I say, iterate support for this organisation anywhere and you will be arrested and quite possibly prosecuted, but not, of course, not necessarily, not least because of the numbers involved. Thank you, Francesca. And stressing again, you know, I certainly don't support a group about which I don't know as much as the Home Secretary thinks I should know, but I also support the freedom to ask the question of whether or not the facts as they currently stand justify the action. And I'm given a little bit of nuance again, but by the fact that the some right-wing newspapers, which are historically very supportive of Benjamin Netanyahu, although even that constituency is close to disappearing. I take the mickey out of the Telegraph comment pages on a very regular basis. They are the gift that keep on giving. So I should add that a regular feature of the unhinged headline, a chap called Timothy Stanley has written a really good piece in the Telegraph today about Benjamin Netanyahu's hemorrhaging of support and credibility. And it's a powerful, well-argued, rather elegant piece of writing by somebody who illustrates, perhaps, just how much danger Netanyahu is leading Israel into. But, of course, that doesn't mean that the answers to the questions that I'm asking today are obvious. Thank you, Francesca. Hazel is in Angus. Hazel, last word on this to you. What's it going to be?
Oh, what a privilege. Well, what I really would like to do is take up what you were saying a little while ago about all the various convictions and activities of this group, as you know that, and their previous incarnation, and say, well, if you're aware of these facts, and they're obviously out there, why is Yvette Cooper not capable of saying, actually, this is the group that have done X, Y, and Z, and give the people who...
It's a very good question. It's a very good question.
Support the people of Gaza, as you say, which is the important thing. But they're being pushed into this situation because they think this other group is doing exactly what they want to do. And as long as she keeps them unaware, she's got herself into a complete and utter mess.
Yeah.
She's totally foolish. And it's, as the lady before me said, I mean, the week before, there was a very, very old lady with a Zimmer frame being very gently led off by two policemen, one of them holding her shopping trolley.
Oh.
What a sight for this country.
It's an appalling sight. And oddly, all the free speech bros and warriors are absolutely silent about it, which we can speculate about until the cows come home. That is why it looks increasingly like a really foolish and therefore potentially dangerous course of action rather than a sinister one.
Oh, her judgment is appalling.
It really is, isn't it? I wonder whether she's vulnerable. I wonder whether Starmer's looking at this mess now and thinking, oh, Lord above, this is another nightmare entirely of our own making. Once again, we've managed to unite the right, the left and the centre in thinking that we're idiots.
Yes, it's not a good look.
It's not a good look indeed. In fact, Roseanne makes that point. I shouldn't steal her thunder. Well, she writes, it seems Labour has found a way to unite left, right and centre. And I think I'll finish with a message from Ewan who says, why are you giving so much weight to the age of the protesters, James? I'm 64 and I'm an idiot. And I'm not alone.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 11:04, and look, credit where credit is due. This looks like a win for the government. When Bridget Phillipson became Education Secretary, she prioritised school absences, not least because the figure stood at roughly double what it was pre-COVID. 1.5 million children were persistently absent. That figure has now come down by about 10%, almost 10%. 140,000 children who were previously persistently absent are now regularly back in schools. That's 5 million more days in the classroom this year than last, and it constitutes the biggest improvement in a decade. And I think, in the absence of a crystal ball, I think that enough time has elapsed since the end of the various lockdowns to make that look meaningful. It's not simply what you might describe as natural slippage or a natural restoration of the previous order. But that's not the point to which I will draw your attention next. It's a very right-wing media friendly headline that has sprung from this story, and I'll read you the bit of the story from which it has sprung. It's an analysis of the future life chances that are jeopardised by school absence, and it is a cri de coeur, if you like, for us all to think more of children who find themselves caught up in this in these kind of conditions. But she's added the phrase particularly white working class to the story, which guarantees it will get rather more coverage from some corners of the UK media than it would do if it simply said children. Just by way of illustration, one of the many things that surprised me when I started this job was the confidence with which elderly white men insisted, in politics and in media punditry, insisted that the reason why young black boys consistently performed worse in schools was all the fault of the parents. It was down to either absent fathers or careless parenting. That's the only reason why. We don't need to be putting any effort into helping young black lads. We don't need to be. Why is the government spending money on this? It's absolutely obvious. They've all absent fathers, and they're all just messing around at home. There's no discipline. And I sort of did early bucking of the trend and taking calls from families to find out why school was usually secondary school would be the cut-off point. People started telling me that their boys were amazing in primary school, and it was only when they got to secondary school that they began to drift somewhat or to sort of drop off the radar, and it had very little to do with what was going on at home. Not that challenged the prejudices and preconceptions of the pundits and politicians who insisted that the reason why young black lads did worse at school was all to do with parents. Well, now that Bridget Phillipson has reflected the likelihood of white working class children being the most likely to slip through the cracks, those same people seem to have changed their tune completely. White working class kids are being written off in our schools, and none of the people that explained that it was all down to parenting and conditions at home when it was black kids are offering up the same explanations. I can't think why that would be. Well, if only there was a sort of word to describe that kind of attitude to children in identical situations but possessed of different skin colours. I wonder what it was. Anyway, you'd have to ask them, I suppose. And it is the line, particularly white working class British students. Far too many young people, particularly white working class British students, don't get the results that they need at GCSE or A-level to allow them to continue to university. And that is something that they are going to address. You're looking particularly at suspension and exclusion levels. Imagine that, eh? Suspension and exclusion levels among a unspecified section of society, an unspecified demographic. Oh, well, I need to know what the demographic is before I can tell you what the reason is behind the suspensions and expulsions. Really? Why? Well, obviously because if they're black kids, then it's because they're wrong-uns and their parents are awful. But if they're white kids, it's because of political correctness and they've been betrayed by the Westminster establishment. Do you see what I mean? You see how nuts it is sometimes not to dig a little deeper into this kind of coverage. But that's not what interests me most today. I'm not interested in the ethnic distinctions. I feel sorry for all kids who are being let down by their schools, and it's about all of them that I want to talk today. I've failed. I think I've realised something. We haven't had a bad phone-in together, you and me, for years now, but there are some that don't land quite as well as I think they should. And there's one subject where I just don't think you're as interested as I am in the subject, and it's why we need to change the way we approach stories like this slightly. So because of my very specific set of circumstances, my family and education and life, I am fascinated by the path not taken. I'm adopted and I went to private school. If neither of those two things had happened, I have absolutely no idea where I'd be today, but I'm pretty sure I wouldn't be here. And I really like being here. So I'm fascinated by the relationship between circumstance and opportunity. But I think I'm more fascinated by it than you are. And I think sometimes when I've tried to start these conversations and they haven't sung quite as sweetly as other conversations that we have, it's not because I failed to communicate my enthusiasm to you for the subject matter. It's because you don't care about it as much as I do. You're not as interested in it as I am. And I want to address that. I want to find a new way into it, a way that reflects what interests you more than necessarily what interests me. Because if you went to a school like mine and you were of very average measurable intelligence, so if you were a C-grade student, let us say, then the avenues that you were encouraged to explore in later life were infinite. You would hardly ever at my school hear a teacher telling a boy that wasn't for the likes of him, or that he wasn't clever enough to pursue that, up to and including medicine. You would not be told that dreaming of being a doctor was ridiculous if you were currently getting C's in science. You would be encouraged to knuckle down, to work hard, to avail yourself of all the opportunities that you could at a school like mine, and there is no reason on earth why you shouldn't do straight sciences for A-levels and go to medical school and become a doctor. And listen, I don't like the word thick. I used to use it a lot, and I really shouldn't have done. But I don't know what words you use instead. So I'm talking about kids at my school who are now doctors who were not top of the class or even close to being top of the class. And that is the opposite of being written off at school. And that is largely white upper middle class pupils at public schools or private schools who are never told that they are having ideas above their station. And I find that fascinating, but I know that you don't, because that's not, well, for most people, that's not an experience that you've ever had. And you've got no idea what it would be like if you did. You know, and what if you are intelligent, but the teachers don't recognise either your intelligence or the necessity of approaching you slightly differently. You need, you might be neurodiverse, although you didn't know that then, and you might need a slightly different approach. You might need a little bit of help. So much going on here that the idea of writing off pupils should be a source of national shame. It really should. But I don't know what it looks like. I really don't know what it looks like. There's a chicken and egg problem here, because it's not clear whether pupils are doing badly because they are frequently absent from school, or pupils are absent from school because they are doing badly. And then, of course, you have the genuine medical need as well. I think long COVID still accounts for a lot more of this problem than some of the expertise or some of the political commentary would allow. But I want to set that aside today as well, because it is something we've talked about a lot in the past, but it's not what we're talking about today. We're talking about pupils who should and could be at school but are not, and how they are being written off. And what I want you to tell me as a grown-up is what that's like. I want you to just describe what it's like to conclude that school is just not worth going to. And I bet a lot of parents have no idea how disconnected their sons and daughters might be from full-time education. It is, it's a society's responsibility to educate the next generation of children. Parents play a part in it, but it's society's responsibility. It is a school's responsibility, but they are underfunded and overworked and don't what's the word I'm looking for? Don't have the capacity to do everything that they want to do. Show me somebody in the public sector who feels they've got the capacity to do everything that they want to do, and I'll show you a saint or an angel or a liar. For the massive majority of people in the public sector, whether it's the NHS or the education system, they simply don't have the capacity to do all the things that they want to do. But what I want you to tell me is what that's like as you look back at the young you. John in Edinburgh points out this week's Full Disclosure interview with Kevin Rowland, the Dexys Midnight Runner singer, about his experience of being misunderstood as a child, being sort of just dropping out, bright as a button. But I always think of cogs turning. And you know how the teeth on two cogs, if they don't bite, if they don't join, then they're turning, one of them is turning forever, pointlessly, and one of them is never going to turn at all. It's about cogs, and you're a cog. The school is a cog that's constantly turning. You're a cog, but your teeth never bit in to the turning cog, or it did and then it stopped, it got detached. So you are written off, for want of a better phrase. That's the phrase Bridget Phillipson has chosen. What does it do to your life? I'd love to talk to you if you turned it round and you've got a kind of clear view of what happened back then, and you realise that you were written off, but you didn't write yourself off. But it may well be that you just look back now and think that school let you down, to be written off by school. So there's several ways into this. That's the grown-up looking back and telling the rest of us what it's actually like to be written off by school. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. We can take the parent as well, who is watching a child fail to engage. A teacher telling us, why is this happening? What are for you, medical diagnoses aside, looking at entirely behavioural and educational issues, what are the major reasons why children, and if you want to go there, please go there, particularly, the Education Secretary says, white working class children, why children detach themselves from the education system? Why did you do it? 0345 6060973. Why, as a teacher, past or present, do you think it happens? What are the key reasons you would point to? Because I've read Bridget Phillipson's article today and I haven't really seen any explanations as to why we think this happens. And I don't buy the arguments that right-wingers used to put forward when it was black kids underperforming in school, that it's all the fault of the parents or it's all because of absent fathers. It must be more interesting than that. It must be more nuanced than that. Why does this happen? What are the key reasons why a young British school pupil would slowly or quickly detach themselves entirely or largely from the education system? Because it seems to me, it's mesh is the word I'm looking for, apparently. Thank you. A lot of engineers listening. Cogs mesh, they don't bite. So the cogs unmesh. And I don't know if it's the correct language to talk about kids being written off. Sometimes I think the kids are doing the writing off. They're writing off education, and accordingly, in some ways, they're writing off themselves, because the statistics are kind of scary. By the age of 28, those who were regularly going to school are earning about £10,000 a year more than those with poor attendance records during their GCSE years. It's also, of course, as Bridget Phillipson suggests, possible that learning these bad habits, things like commitment, attendance, a work ethic, you take the absence of those things into the workplace, and they may grow into an adult who sees no issue with skipping work or breaking commitments, weakening not only the relationships they form, but also the bonds of obligation that tie us together as a society. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. But I do know that you know, and I know that you can tell me. Why do you think, what are the main reasons why some children, regardless, I think, of intelligence, and regardless of family background, sometimes, some children unmesh from the cogs of education? Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. It's 11:18.
James O'Brien on LBC.
minutes after 11. It's a little bit Groundhog Day, isn't it? An education secretary coming out talking about children being failed by the education system, picking upon a certain electorally beneficial demographic, in this case the white working class, whatever that means. You're more likely, I think. It's another interesting piece I read today, I forget where, pointing out that a plumber is likely to earn more now than somebody in a white-collar job. So what on earth does a working class designation even mean? So, I pick the adjectives you prefer, but ideally just talk about yourself and tell me why. Either you wrote off school or school wrote off you. And what does it do to a kid? What does it do? It's the polar opposite environment to the one that I was educated in, where even if you were a naughty boy who ended up getting expelled, you didn't have the opportunity to opt out. Partly because your parents are paying tens of thousands of pounds, but you couldn't hide in a school like mine, even if you desperately wanted to. And that always makes me wonder about the path not taken, how you would disappear under the waves, even if you were as bright as a button, if you were built a certain way. Tony's in Belfast. Tony, what would you like to say?
Hi, I'd like to point... thanks for having me on the show, James. I'd like to point out, you said that there's that it's the same thing when people years ago were talking about blacks underachieving. And now they're talking about the white working class underachieving, and how it's the same people complaining now that weren't complaining then.
Yes.
I'd like to point out that when it was blacks underachieving, there was no extra help given to white people at the time, whereas now there's lots of initiatives to give help to black people that are underachieving, to black
like what?
Not even underachieving, but blacks in schools.
Like what?
Are given lots of extra help. There's extra courses for them.
Like what?
There's internments.
No, what? Tell me about them. I don't know about these courses. When were you last at school?
93, I left school.
Oh, so what are the courses that you're talking about?
Well, there was black Saturday school to give them extra help to catch up when they're behind on things. The teachers gave them extra help.
You were talking about in 1993 now.
Well, it still goes on now.
Right.
But
so why don't have you set up one of these things?
No, I haven't.
For white kids?
No.
Why not?
There's no funding, is there, for any white groups? All ethnic groups get specialist funding, whereas anything set up just for white people would be shut down.
Yeah, the problem with this, Tony, is that you're talking gibberish.
Well, I'm not, am I?
Well, no, you categorically are. Could you give me an example of a white group that was shut down?
Well, the British National Party, for a start. It's not been shut down, but it was... It came under a lot of pressure and it was forced through the courts.
Well, you know what? Every day's a school day. I had no idea the British National Party was an educational institution dedicated to advancing the causes of undereducated or forgotten children. But you crack on, mate. Tanya's in Leeds. Tanya, what would you like to say?
Hiya, James. That was an interesting call.
Well, you've got a PhD in stupidity, so you mind your language. Carry on.
I was just saying to your producer, basically, I think I can look at this from... You were kind of asking two questions, really. So, first of all, I've actually spoken to you before a little while ago about something unrelated, but I am neurodivergent. I'm autistic and ADHD. I'm about to turn 36, and I wasn't diagnosed till my 30s. So, from my perspective, when it comes to school, I was an intelligent young girl. And I was an incredibly quiet young girl. And I was sort of your textbook perfectionist when I was in primary particularly. But I was always too scared to speak up when I struggled. And I think because of how well I did in other areas, they were willing to ignore some of the areas that I was quite clearly struggling in. And I was saying to your producer that when I got sort of into secondary, sitting my GCSEs, and then it was my AS levels. I went from being at GCSE like an A-star student to getting B's views at AS level, and then when I went to university, I actually failed my first year. I completely checked out.
What happened?
I spent a lot of time over the years thinking about this. And I think it actually influenced my career path because I've been I was a teacher up until this year. I was a teacher for 10 years. And I now work directly in inclusion with children with EHCPs. And I think it was upon getting diagnosed autistic and ADHD, I realised a lot of my experiences in school were actually related to those barriers, those gears you were talking about. And I think that's the case for a lot of children as well. And for me, I think I checked out because it suddenly just felt inaccessible. And I spent years thinking, I must be stupid. I've failed. I went
so
from
when it became more rigorous academically, your tools no longer worked, but that just meant you needed new tools. It didn't mean that you were incapable of getting it.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of it for me was like cognitive overload and processing issues. And I suddenly went from finding stuff relatively easy to understand to sitting, and I did a philosophy degree, and I would just sit there and think, I don't understand this, and yet I'm intelligent, and I couldn't make sense of it. So my option, because I was undiagnosed and because I present quite intelligent.
So this is doubly interesting to me. Firstly, because I think it must be a larger part of it. We're a lot more conscious of neurodiversity. But that doesn't explain why the numbers would be going up. You'd have thought that with a better understanding of neurodiversity now than we had 10, 20, 30 years ago, despite, we should add, the best efforts of the British National Party, but now that we have much better understanding of neurodiversity, why would the statistical evidence of kids not engaging with school be going up rather than down?
Well, I don't think it's just neurodiversity. I think there's a lot more going on than this. And I could talk to you all day about it because it's an interest of mine. In the frame of neurodiversity, and I think there would be many other educators who would be saying a similar thing to me, it's better understood, but at the same time, it's still not as understood or supported as appropriately as it should be.
But that doesn't explain why it's going up, not down, does it? I mean, there's definitely still a lot of room for improvement. But if you point to a child who is detaching, what was that word that just told me to use? I've forgotten already. When they're detaching from unmeshing. Thank you, Tad. Unmeshing from the education system. A lot of the stuff that's happened in the last 10 years might have made us think that would be less likely to go on now.
Yeah.
The main reason for unmeshing is neurodiversity, or a main reason for unmeshing is neurodiversity. The fact that we're working much harder and doing much better, and that people like you exist providing specialist help to send children when that wasn't really the case 20 years ago becomes even more baffling, perhaps. I don't know. Tanya, thank you. Ashley's in Dulwich. Ashley, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Trigger warning. I'm going to say something that a lot of people probably don't want to hear.
That's a bit like having one of those signs up saying you don't have to be crazy to work here, but it helps. I don't worry about what people want to hear and don't want to hear. Just be honest with me and authentic, and I'll deal with the rest.
I will. It's a cultural problem. And I mean that in every sense of the word, in that I was told when I was young and black, I'm 43 now, but I was young and black and I was told it was my fault. I was lazy. It's because my parents weren't in a traditional relationship. It was because of this. And all I heard in the media, not so much radio at that time, as you probably can appreciate, but I heard that was the problem, okay? Yes. And me being blamed for that has stayed with me. And I'm pretty successful now. I do okay. But I've got to say that today's parents of my age and probably above, they don't prioritise education. They don't prioritise this idea that education helps because there is an attack. Once again, there is an attack from the right-wing media, and it has been going on probably for 20 years, on higher education.
On learning.
On liberal elites, on learning, on being educated. And
what a brilliant point. So this is class, not race, that you're describing.
Yeah, I think it was always going to come around when what helps the higher educated, the well-to-do, is to have a serf kingdom beneath them that can serve their needs. And now there's an immigration problem, and that's not doable, and nobody wants immigrants to do that work. They are now convincing, and it's been going on for a long time, they're convincing the white working class that education means nothing. You can just be a hard worker. You do what you've got to do. But all it does is serve one class at the expense of the other. And what I'm seeing now is that the fruits coming to bear. Does that make sense? I'm seeing a generation...
except all I'd say is I don't think it's confined to the white working class, but I think it's the first time they've been in the position that you describe, certainly since sort of, I don't know, in the post-war period.
Well, forgive me for saying this, but the only reason it matters in this country is because the white working class are now feeling it, and it is something that the media can jump on because of the rise of populism. Yeah. So the argument that I've got is this is self-serving. This is what was created by the people that these parents voted for. They now see their children not doing as well, and instead of taking action and saying, we either vote for something that's going to give us free education again, because all of these boomers, they had free university. They took advantage of it, created companies, and now they bemoan giving anyone of a lower class, we worked for it, we pulled ourselves from our bootstraps. They bought their houses for 30 grand and sold them for $1 million. It is crazy what's going on, mate. It is absolutely crazy. And
so this just fit. Well, no, because the statistics support it. So you've got two things going on. I love that old phrase. You've probably heard it a million times. I'm not paranoid. They really are out to get me. So you're right that they're selling a narrative of yet more victimhood on this occasion. If the white, well, we heard it from our caller in Belfast, who literally thinks that the reason why people like him haven't done very well in life is because people like you get all the help and get all the funding.
But
and
James,
hang on, let me finish. I'm in the middle of interrupting you. So the narrative of victimhood is very seductive, although also pretty hard to sustain or support with evidence and facts. But the numbers do say that more kids are opting out of education than ever before, and you don't fully address that simple fact. From whatever ethnicity, from whatever demographic, it is more likely to be class than it is to be race. And kids are... What? Education has been maligned? Education has been turned into a negative?
Can I give you the genius behind this?
Go on, then.
But by including white working class, you make an enemy. So who's doing well other than the white working class? It must be another. So you're giving the other somebody to point at. If white working class kids aren't doing bad, your first caller said it. There were black clubs.
We go back to the BNP fan in Belfast.
The educational BNP geniuses that were teaching our young kids how to be...
Before they got shut down by the do-gooders, Ashley. Yeah. Before they got... Well, crikey. And I mean, you're right to bring immigration into it as well, because if you are determined to cut off the supply of labour... particularly in the areas where British people have demonstrated a degree of reluctance to work, then what you're not telling all the people that you're encouraging to set fire to hotels of a weekend is that it's their kids that you want to be doing the jobs that they don't think that they should be doing. We're going to get rid of all the foreigners so your kids can do all those jobs that you don't want to do. Never add that bit of the story. And, of course, the antidote to all of that is education. I wonder also about the demonisation of teachers. Whenever teachers take industrial action, the hatred that some people speak about teachers, even when they're not taking industrial action, the hatred, genuine, I don't use that word that often, but the hatred with which people in the pundit class and politics speak about teachers is extraordinary. If you're hearing that, or your parents are reflecting that, why would you engage with school? There's a long list of things that would constitute or contribute to the unmeshing. But I think Ashley has provided the best account so far. There's room for plenty more. Thomas Watts is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
36 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where the question of children from whatever background, although the Education Secretary has expressed the belief that this is particularly prevalent among white working class children, are unmeshing, if you like, from the education system. Mike has told me what word I should be using. It's not even meshing. Here you go. It's synchro-meshing. No, but it's not, though, is it? Because that means it's meshing. I'm unmeshing. I don't think I want to say unsynchro-meshing. That sounds ridiculous, although it probably do quite well in Scrabble. They're unmeshing from the educational system, and I want to know why. Part of the reason is a sort of denigration of expertise, a denigration of education, if you like. This message really brought that home to me. I was not written off in school, writes Matt. I had friends who maybe were. On GCSE results day, they celebrated their lower grades and made up a game, who can make the longest word using your grades, and the winning word was fudge. Can you get a G? Could you get a G in GCSEs, Matt? Or you could? Keith's nodding very enthusiastically. They were ostensibly rejecting the education system, but by playing a word game. It's not easy to embrace a system that tells you are worthless. This isn't my personal experience, but outside of the classroom, the children I'm talking about did not seem unintelligent. Why would those kids have unmeshed? 0345 6060 Denigration of education in general and of teachers in particular. A sort of right-wing media push towards if you like, well, the surf class, but also the celebration of ignorance, you know. I always think the two things that I can't quite believe fell victim to class war were food and books. You know, food, like fancy food. I said, oh, that's so middle class. What a stupid thing to do. And I did it. I used to use quinoa as a byword for annoying. But why? Why would you do, like, not taking time to prepare food or grow food or experiment with food? We paint it as a middle class and therefore undesirable pursuit. Same with books. And I think we've done it with education. So you'd put that on the list. The neurodiversity angle doesn't quite fit the facts, because we're so much better, still not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, than we used to be, that it should be getting better, not worse. What else are we going to put on the list? Mike's in Woodbridge. Mike, what would you like to say?
Good morning, James. How are you?
Very well. What's on your mind? Disengaged.
I as a long-time educationalist, and I think this is down to the curriculum. That this is the curriculum that is not favouring those kids who are not academic. I just listened to Bridget Phillipson saying that she wanted to raise the attainment of white working class boys, I think she said, or white working class children.
Yeah.
Attainment in what? It'll be math, it'll be English, it'll be science. Is she going to use as a measure attainment in woodwork, metalwork, PE, or anything like that?
Do you know what this is? This is what I'm going to call henceforth the youth club conundrum. So I have caught myself, Mike, in recent years, just getting a little bit impatient with people who bring certain arguments to certain conversations. And most obviously, I did it with youth clubs. When we were talking about other areas of disengagement among young people, and someone would ring in and talk to me about the importance of the youth clubs, and I would feel something a bit unpleasant unfurl in my mind, and I'd be a bit impatient and a bit dismissive. And I'm trying to get better. I'm trying to guard against it. And I nearly caught myself doing it then. I thought, oh, here we go. Someone wanging on about woodwork and someone wanging on about metalwork. I've heard it all before, but that's not a fair response to you.
Well, let me come back at you then,
please.
Because in Woodbridge we have a large community workshop, and I worked with a charity on 6-7 pilots with disaffected young people from school. These were kids who were they were school refusals. They were on the verge of exclusion, and we ran courses for them. And it was fully practical. The feedback we got at the end of that was unbelievable, because I got my confidence back. I didn't know I could do this.
Yeah.
One young woman who had not been to school for 3 years came and watched for 1 week, next week joined in, never missed a session. She went back to college and got her A-levels. She's at university now.
So now, I keep using the word mesh. The word we like is engage. They've disengaged, and you need to find something that will engage with them.
And it was practical. And because of that, they got success. And the feedback said things like, the one day of the week I look forward to.
I love this.
Now, what have we done to young people if there's just one day of the week they look forward to? There's something rotten in the state of
Education.
Yeah,
all right, Hamlet. I've already done the bit about why my particular interest in this subject isn't necessarily widely shared, but why wouldn't that happen at a school like mine, a fee-paying school that didn't have particularly high bars for getting in? We didn't really, and you could do woodwork, and some kids thrived at CDT, as we called it at the time, and we even had a cadet force. Everybody found something they were good at. I think I've just answered my own question, haven't I?
Let me give you an example. Because one of these kids that was working, and he was actually very good with his hands. So I said, "Do you do woodwork at school?" And he said, "Well, yes, we do, and but none of the tools are ever sharp because they have to get rid of the technician."
Cuts, austerity.
It's cuts, it's austerity, and all the rest of it. And it's the hidden consequences of those cuts.
And I'm a snob, because my knee-jerk reaction to you describing practical work is something that must have been drilled into me when I was young. And in fact, it's stupid. A, because we need people doing all of the things that I need people doing all the things that you describe. And B, because the turning of the wheel of our society will actually mean you're probably now going to be better equipped for the workplace with practical skills than you would be with what we used to call an ology.
And I read somewhere that something like 60% of the jobs that young 7-year-olds will go into don't yet exist.
Yeah, well, that's AI and stuff, isn't it?
Yeah, well, I mean, if you look at AI, how well are teachers using AI? Because young people are using AI to advise themselves on personal relationships and problem solving.
So someone should say to Bridget Phillips, attainment in what? Attainment of what? You're going to measure improvement and success by attainment in what areas?
And the trouble is that what they measure is what is measurable, and that is largely academic, that can be put onto exam papers and all the rest of it.
To be clear, sorry to interrupt you, Mike,
go on.
But to be clear, what you're advocating is the idea that an engaged child who has found something that they are enthusiastic about will then re-engage with the things that they've disengaged from. So it's not just about becoming good at woodwork. They will actually be a more productive pupil in all the other areas of life as well, because they matter.
It's called the halo effect.
Is it?
It's called the halo effect. Now, when I was a primary teacher, believe it or not, I used to teach pottery because we had a room that we could do it in. And the kids who were no good at anything else, they were struggling at maths and all the rest of it, suddenly found something they could be good at and produced something really worthwhile. The result was their confidence grew and they started to improve in other aspects.
Because a confident child is a much better pupil than an unconfident
child. Absolutely. And I'm afraid our curriculum knocks the confidence out of far too many, largely working class.
Yeah, of course it is. And they're not getting the advantage and encouragement, example and encouragement at home either, in a way that they might have done if they had middle-class parents. So the politics of it is absolutely fascinating. You've had at least 14 years, from 2010 to 2024, of the cuts that Mike describes. You've had at least 14 years of the denigration of the teaching profession. The curriculum points that he rises don't really have a political subtext, but the austerity does. The denigration of expertise and education does. They've created, the right wing have created an environment in which, if you prefer, white working class children are slipping through the cracks, are being written off by the education system. And now, as seems to be the fashion in UK politics, the people who've created the problems are turning around to complain about them and lay the blame at the feet of the people who did not create the problems, whether you're talking about the prison system or the schools. Mad, isn't it, how many of these pieces fit together once you actually spend a few minutes thinking about it. Brilliant stuff from Mike, and a little memo to self, which is guard against these knee-jerk reactions. Youth clubs are a huge part of the rise in youth dissatisfaction, and you know, a restrictive, prescriptive curriculum, the Michael Gove effect, if you like, is probably a huge part of children disengaging or unmeshing from the education system as well. 11:46 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
49 is the time. Here is I'm a fan of a nicely turned phrase. Here's my favourite of the day so far. It's only 10 to 12, of course. It's early doors. And so, like Charlie Brown, shocked each time Lucy pulls the ball away as he is about to kick it, Trump allows wishful thinking to triumph over experience. That's from a piece written by Professor Sir Lawrence Freedman, the Emeritus Professor of War Studies at King's College London, and the co-author of the Substack comment is Freed. In fact, we had his son Sam, the other co-author of that Substack, on the programme last week, talking about the misinformation surrounding the VAT on school fees debate. But it is to Donald Trump and his meeting with Vladimir Putin that Professor Sir Lawrence has turned our attention this morning, and it's why he joins me now. I can't read out your whole Substack, which would be the alternative to actually talking to you, Lawrence, but it's a cracking piece of work. In a nutshell, Trump has sort of simultaneously realised that Putin has been playing him all along and doesn't really have an exit strategy from that continuing con.
Yeah, well, he realises that he's being played along, and then each time he hears something which gives him hope, he acts as if there is a real prospect of some sort of deal. And I think the heart of this story is the fact that he uses this chap Steve Witkoff as his main negotiator, not only on this, but on Iran and Gaza and so on. And he's not very good at it. He's not a diplomat. He doesn't always understand what he's heard. So that in this particular case, first he thought that Putin had agreed to meet with Zelensky, as well as Trump, which wasn't the case. And then he believed that Putin was making a really quite significant concession, being prepared to swap some territories that they've taken in return for getting a bit more of another. And it turned out that was never in Putin's mind at all. So it's a complete embarrassment.
Do we know what is on the table? I mean, we'll spend a moment afterwards looking at the significance in itself of this meeting in Alaska, but do we know what Putin is turning up with, as it were, from the point of view?
The only thing that we know that Putin believes himself to have offered, and he's been very stubborn in holding on to his position, really since, as it was sort of set out clearly in June 24, is a possible air ceasefire, so that although operations would go on the ground and everything else would be the same, you wouldn't see the same sort of attacks on cities in Ukraine, but for that matter on oil depots and so on in Russia. That's the only thing that seems to be on offer. But all the sort of things that Trump appears to be interested in are not on Putin's mind at all.
Which, I mean, history's taught us means that Trump will pretend he was never interested in them at all. If some sort of, quotes, deal, end quotes, is cobbled together, and this is where your analysis, I think, is at its most pessimistic, and Zelensky can't abide it, obviously. It's not something Zelensky could contemplate. For example, the surrendering of lands that they've been furiously defending now for years. Zelensky gets painted by Trump as the villain of the piece who's refused to play ball.
I think that's the fear of many Ukrainians and Europeans. I'm less worried about that than one might have been a few months ago, just simply because the whole political context has moved on, and because the whole thing, the risk was predicated on there being an interesting deal for Trump to push. But if there's no new deal for Trump to push, then I think even he realises that you can't blame Ukraine for not going along with something that doesn't really exist. So I think but that is clearly on the minds of the Ukrainian Europeans. And it also just illustrates the problem of trying to do these things in a conversation with Putin without the Ukrainians being there.
But you can, of course, withdraw support, even if you're not necessarily trying to paint him as the saboteur of a peace process.
Indeed, but to some extent that's happened already. I mean, as Vance has just made clear, they're not. I mean, their concession is to allow Europeans to buy American kit for Ukrainians rather than to provide the sort of amounts that Biden provided.
And do we know how enthusiastically the Europeans are stepping up to that challenge, Lawrence?
I mean, it's a glass half full, glass half empty. But I mean, politically, they're solid. They've got a clear line and they're sticking to it. They are doing more. It's just taking a long time to show results. But one shouldn't underestimate, given the gloom that the Europeans would give up too, that they haven't done that and they're still pushing and doing their best to support Zelensky. And again, this has been going on for some time. So nobody's in a state of shock about this anymore. People know what they need to do.
So, final question. A week from today, when all is done and dusted, and he's had his photo opportunity, as you write, meeting Trump as an equal on Alaskan soil, which has a resonance, of course, with many people in Russia. What's the best case scenario a week today as to what might emerge from this meeting?
The best case scenario is that Trump realises that he shouldn't have done this with Putin alone, and invites Zelensky along as well, and then sort of dares Putin to join him. That's my best case. I think the most likely case is that there's some warm words, interesting possibilities, working groups, but nothing very much happens.
Well, we shall soon find out. Professor Sir Lawrence Freedman, many thanks, Emeritus Professor of War Studies at King's College London, and the co-author of... I'm getting quite into Substacks, so be warned, I'm going to start recommending a few as we move forward. Certainly, starting in earnest when I get back from my imminent holiday. Comment is Freed is the name of the one that Lawrence and his son Sam put together, 11:56. And oddly enough, Sam's particular area of expertise is education, which is the conversation that we were in the midst of when we broke away to talk to Lawrence. And it is back to education that we return. Chiefly the question of how you end up unmeshing. The cog of the education system continues to turn, but you are no longer meshed. You are no longer connected to it, so you cease to spin. Aaron's in Chorley. Aaron, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Great to talk to you.
Thank you. Likewise.
I at high school we had a careers advisor, and she turned around to me when I was in year 10 and said, academic education isn't your strong suit, so we're going to take you out and we're going to put you on an extended work experience programme, which meant that I was taken out of school 2.5 days a week in my final 2 years, which meant I never got to sit all of my GCSEs. So the desire I had to go to university was kind of taken away from me because I couldn't get there without the GCSE results, and obviously because I was taken out of school I couldn't sit them all. And then,
so this is a counterpoint to Mike in Woodbridge, who garnered a lot of admiration for his contribution. They tried to give you vocational training, but in retrospect, they did you a grave disservice by doing that.
Yeah, just because it wasn't the direction I wanted to go in. Yeah. And it was only through the involvement with my local youth service that I got involved in the Every Child Matters consultation stuff, and I was offered a place at university.
When was this? What year was this?
So 2009, I was offered a place at UCLan Uni after somebody had seen me do a talk at an Every Child Matters conference.
Gosh.
And it's only through that I got to go to uni, and since then I've done 2 degrees. And I'm working towards a master's, and I'm now a qualified youth worker myself at my local children's hospice.
So the system gave up on you. You didn't give up on the system.
No. I did for a short time when I was first put on the extended work experience programme. It was kind of, well, what's the point? I'm never going to be able to get to university. But luckily for me, like I said, having the opportunity of being offered a place at a university course through being involved.
Under a specific scheme looking at kids, young people who'd perhaps slipped through the net. So if we marry your contribution and indeed your experiences to Mike's, what we really need to take away from this is the importance of having individual interest, not saying here's a one-size-fits-all scheme or plan, but actually what your careers teacher failed to do so obviously was recognise you. See you, Aaron, not just another boy or a boy with these results or a boy with these attributes, specifically you, and then work out what would be the best path for you to follow.
Yeah, and like I said, I'm lucky now. I got to university, I got to do what I wanted to. I was the first person from my family ever to go to university, which then inspired my brother to do the same, lovely. And my sister to go. And now I'm a qualified youth worker. I work at my local children's hospice, supporting children and young people who also have their own problems with school and education.
But at least they've got someone
life-limiting conditions.
Yeah, and you are well placed to help them. You can put. Yeah, I mean, you don't need me to tell you this, probably, Aaron, but other people listening might. Guess what happened to the Every Child Matters scheme?
It got scrapped.
Pretty much straight away after Cameron got in, I think.
Yeah, it was. And again, the Labour government with the top-up fees and the grants, they're the only reason I could have accepted that place to university, because the money was there to be able to support me, because financially my family wouldn't have been able to.
And then there it is.
I feel like schemes like that.
That's the best way forward. So the Tories cut it, Labour tried to repair it, and our friend in Belfast rings in to blame it all on people of colour. Aaron, do you follow Chorley? Do you follow the football club?
The football club. I'm a Burnley fan myself, but now living in Chorley, I do follow Chorley, and they're doing quite well.
Off to a winning start, just like Kidderminster. I don't think we play until November, but if we carry on our current trajectory, we could be vying for the playoff places come the end of the season. Thank you, Aaron. The time is 12 noon.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 4 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. This is one of the subjects that we stumbled into together and which remains among my unexpected favourites. It's inspired by the front page of one newspaper today, where it's revealed that drivers over the age of 70 would be banned from the roads if they fail compulsory eye tests. But it's not the detail of the story that interests me most. It's the background. It's the subtext. It's that simple question that I've asked you on, I think, 3 occasions previously, and I'm going to ask you again today. What's it like to become the parent of the parent when it falls to you to tell your dad or your mum that they really shouldn't be driving anymore? I had no idea, because I'm not a big motoring person, as you know, and you may think at first glance that this is a motoring topic, but it's really not. It's so much bigger than that. And I didn't really have a relationship with the importance to independence and autonomy of simply driving. And the level of concern that you, as the son or the daughter of the driver, feel growing with every passing week, or every near miss, or even every accident, every dink and every prang. And we were talking earlier, Eleanor and I, about why I love this subject. I think it's possible I love it more than she does. But we were trying to work out why I love it so much. And it is, I think, to do with that swapping of roles, that reversal of roles. That probably more than anything else, because I know that dementia is the sort of mothership of what I'm about to describe. But in the absence of serious mental decline, this is probably the first and possibly only time that you actually assume the role of authority over the person who, for the rest of your life, has been in the role of authority. I think that's why I like it so much, because I love transformation. I think the best conversations we have together often involve transformation or unexpected changes. It's why I'm a great subscriber to that old line about having a mind. There's no point having a mind if you never change it. Change is what informs some of our most fruitful and interesting conversations. But it's not just change, is it? It's a genuine reversal of roles. So the person that taught you everything in some ways when it comes to behaviour, the person who taught you to wipe your bottom or whatever it may be, the person who gave you all of the guidance that you needed in life, the person who taught you the difference between right and wrong, the person quite possibly who taught you how to drive, gosh, I'd never thought of that element before, becomes the person whose keys you have to confiscate, the keys you have to take away. And that is what I want to know about. I want to know what you think that is. I want you to tell me what those moments are like. So it's not about the eye test, because that is only one element of what might prompt you to tell dad or mum that they really shouldn't be driving anymore. And what I think people like me didn't realise until we started having these conversations was just how febrile this conversation can be, just how absolutely febrile the conversation can be. And that's what I want to talk about. I'm just going to deal with a couple of texts. Hi, James. The lead story on LBC this morning is the murder of 5 journalists. Why are you not talking about it? We've spent the whole day trying to get hold of the head of the office in Doha at Al Jazeera, and we haven't been able to, but I will be speaking to a colleague of the 5 journalists that have been killed by the IDF in the course of this hour. I'm only just addressing that, Donald. I'm taking it as a polite inquiry rather than an aggressive one, despite the fact that you've written, why are you not talking about it? The answer is that I want to speak to someone who can tell us more than I currently know, or indeed more than you currently know, and we will be doing that before 1 o'clock today, O ye of little faith. But I do like this story because it speaks very directly to personal experiences that we will be having up and down the country, literally as I speak. So what the
experience is like in the context of you actually doing it. But I don't think I've asked you before how it makes you feel. So that's what I want to try to get into today. So first of all, I obviously want to know how resistant the beloved relative is, how hard it is or how hard it was to take away your parents' car keys, all right? 0345 6060973. Also, the threshold through which they drove, notice not over which they drove, but the threshold through which they drove that made you realise, I've really got to do this now. We can't put this off any longer. And then how hard it actually was. So there's 2 or 3 elements to that question. It's why? What was the breaking point, if you like, that made you realise you had to do it? And how hard was it to do it when the moment came? And then finally, knitting those 2 questions together into one neatly answerable inquiry, how did you do it? How did you actually do it in the end? 0345 6060973. And then the thing I don't think I have ever asked you before is how did it make you feel? And you may not have stopped to wonder. You know, it made you feel weird, right? It made you feel a bit sad, perhaps. It maybe discombobulated you. But let's take a moment today to work out whether or not it is that thing that I stumbled into this morning when justifying my interest in this subject to the producer. I said, it's the first time. I've never had to do it. My mum became, I mean, she broke her shoulder a few years ago and never really got back in the car after that. And mobility, it's a great shame because she's not very mobile. But I never really had to do it. If my dad had lived, he really relied on his car. His car was, I mean, when he was a working journalist, his car was like an extension of him. It was absolutely intrinsic to his work. He'd spend, I mean, during the course of the miners' strike, he must have spent more time on the motorway than he did at home, except for sleeping. I can't imagine what that would have been like, because there was never a moment in my relationship with my late father when I had to tell him what to do. And I had to assume the role that he'd always had in my life of kind of being in charge, is the simplest way of putting it. And in my mind now, even at the age of 53, I still think of my mum and dad as being in charge. And they're not. Of course they're not. But they kind of are. Do you know what I mean? Subconsciously. It's just what it feels like. So what on earth is it like that to realise that not only do you have to suddenly take charge, 0345 6060973, but also that your parent is probably not going to like it. So we've got the detail and we've got the depth, I hope, in this inquiry. And, of course, we've got a guest from Al Jazeera to talk to us about the deliberate attack on this journalist in a tent outside the al-Shifa hospital, and the claims, you can't libel the dead, of course, but if more details emerge, we shall look at them with great interest. The claims that this very, very prominent journalist, who was renowned for his reports from the front line of the carnage in Gaza, was also secretly operating as a Hamas operative. That's what the IDF have claimed, while admitting that it was a deliberate attack on him that left 4 of his colleagues dead, about whom no claims regarding Hamas have been made. We'll be finding out more about that as well. But I am intrigued by the reversal of roles, by the idea that you are suddenly in charge of your parent, when previously your parent had always been in charge of you. It is a sort of what was it like question, but it's got a little bit of depth to that. I've never really acknowledged the dimension that we're acknowledging today. I've never really clocked it. It's only because I was sort of charged with trying to work out why I find the story so moving. I find the story so interesting and so moving, and the short answer is because you never ever do that. So it's not a motoring question, is it? It's a human condition question. The idea that you now have to be in charge, which with dementia and other things is commonplace. We know it is. But on this simple issue, so in every other area of life, they're still completely competent, completely on the ball, all the ducks in all the rows. It's all still there, but you just shouldn't be driving anymore, Dad. You just shouldn't be driving it. Who the hell are you to tell me that I shouldn't be driving? I wiped your bottom, you cheeky little whippersnapper. You said that anyway. That's why I find it so interesting. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. A couple of texts on there, but we'll get calls up and running after the next break, but just a couple of closing texts on the conversation we were having about education in the last hour, which we will definitely return to. Alan points out education is a partnership between the pupil, the school and the parents. It needs all three to be cooperating together to get the best possible outcome. Unless you're at a very expensive boarding school, Alan, in which case the parents can completely abnegate their responsibilities and farm them out to the people that they are paying. And I quite like this from Gaz. Don't forget the conspiracy, anti-science, anti-education movements, which are, Gaz claims, largely white parents telling their kids not to believe what they're being taught. I know parents who've taken their kids out of school for just that reason. They would probably be in the statistics as well, but I'd overlook that. It's not just the denigration of expertise, which makes you think of Michael Gove during the Brexit debate. It's the absolute denial of science and of self-evident truth that Donald Trump and some of his key appointments represent. So if your parents are Donald Trump fans, how could they possibly also be education fans? It's 12:15.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 12:16 and you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. So the state's getting involved, over 70s facing driving bans if they fail eye tests, but I'm interested in the driving ban that you imposed on your parent, independently of any laws or regulations or state-based requirements. You did it because you knew they were a liability and they disagreed, and that's what made it so difficult and potentially interesting. Rebecca's in Glasgow. Rebecca, what made you pick up the phone?
Well, this happened to us this year, but the funny thing is actually when my mum was diagnosed with cancer 3.5 years ago, and when she started chemotherapy, the funny thing is she actually ditched her glasses. And she was saying that she could see better, and we were laughing and thinking,
like that scene in Trading Places. I just got an image of Eddie Murphy in the opening scenes of Hallelujah, I can see.
So we actually said, well, if it can, fix your eyesight, your cancer is absolutely fine.
Yeah.
But it wasn't until she'd actually gone for her eye test that the optician actually said, no, actually you don't need glasses. And we were laughing at that. But so right throughout her cancer treatment, she was adamant she was going to be independent. And there were times, I'm actually predominantly bedbound by ME, and so she saw herself as my caregiver and helped a lot with my son, and always worried about, I can't die because what happens to you? So she was adamant and a fierce advocate for herself over her treatment because she had to be here as long as possible. So she drove. And sometimes she would go for her chemo sessions by herself and drive herself home. But we noticed in the year, and last year especially, we'd noticed that her driving was starting to decline, and she'd gone through red lights one point and got a fine for it because she hadn't actually noticed that the lights had changed. And she'd also...
You're not supposed to drive after chemotherapy, are you? Especially after the first few sessions. It's not against any laws, but it is ill-advised.
The thing is, though, these accidents had actually happened when she wasn't having the chemo.
Uh-oh.
So, so it was during that, she'd had her cycles, and she was in that period where she wasn't receiving any chemo. And then there was one time, it was purely misjudged. She had decided that she was going to change lanes, but she hadn't given herself enough space and basically went right up the side of somebody else's car. And we'd actually said, Mum, I think you're starting to, you're focusing more on your thoughts and your worries.
How did she react? Who bit the bullet, you or your son?
Me.
Me. And what did you do?
It until this year.
Right.
It was this year. It was around about the end of February, March this year. She'd driven, she was, when you're a mum, aren't you? But with my son, the sun shone out of my son's backside, and nobody could see past. So she would get up at 5 o'clock in the morning, some mornings, to take him to work. And it was one of these mornings that my son actually phoned me from work and said, Mum, that was the most terrifying journey of my life. And I stay 11 miles from his work, and she stayed with me the night before. and it's all twisty, curvy country roads.
Just give me that. I'm going to nudge you, Rebecca, because there's loads and loads of people waiting to share their story. So how did you broach the site? How did you? What did you do?
I said to her, I said, look, Mum, this can't carry on anymore. And I said, look, what we're going to do is I'm going to drive you everywhere you need to go. So, you stay with me or I stay with you. And I didn't just take the car keys off her, I took the car away.
Gosh. And she took it, did she? She went along with it?
She actually conceded, yes.
That's interesting, because some people must know. They must almost be waiting for the moment. I mean, some people very different. I've got one threat of disinheritance on the board already. If you ever raise this subject again, then I shall disinherit you and all your children, said one dad. So I'll read that out shortly. But I wonder whether some people are almost relieved to have the decision taken away from them. Rebecca, thank you. Take care. Julie's in Sheffield. Julie, what made you pick up the phone?
It happened to us a couple of years ago with my late mum-in-law when she'd been a fantastic driver, really, accident-free. She lived in Doncaster. We were in Sheffield.
Very nearby.
So she used to come over on the motorway. And then on one occasion when she'd come to see some friends who were well in their 80s, she was 80 then, and she said she'd driven down this road, and we said to her, well, that's the wrong way. And she said, no.
It's not funny, is it?
It's not, no.
No, sorry.
No, it's never been a one way. And we said, well, it is. And then, so we sort of almost laughed that off.
Yeah.
But then she was caught for speeding in a 50 and said it had never been a 50. So there were these things that started to add up. And then the final thing was that when she had to have the eye test, she'd got a macular degeneration, where you can't see a bit through the middle of an eye, which they'd said you can drive with that.
Right.
But, so when they come to fill the form in, because it's self-filling the form and sending off, I used to look at the paperwork for her, and I said, you've got this, and she said, don't fill that in. Don't tell them that. They'll take my licence off me.
Oh, no.
I know, and I said, I've got to.
Mum!
I've got to, because if you have
Mum,
an
you can't
accident,
do this, Mum, you can't.
Oh, it was awful.
Oh,
Honestly, James, it was so emotional.
I bet it was.
Awful.
I bet it was.
Anyway, I filled it in as I should have done, and then subsequently she didn't get the licence. She had, just before it came back, she had a little accident where she drove into a van. That was, it was like the third and final thing there. And I'm almost glad it happened because nobody was hurt.
Right.
Because then when the licence was revoked, that she actually said to me, you, in that wet manner that mum-in-laws do, you have taken my independence away from me. I was heartbroken.
Why did you have to do this, not her son?
Oh, he's rubbish at paperwork, James. He's a lovely son and a lovely husband, but he just didn't get it, and I was like...
You were genuinely... Well, I mean, that's the point, isn't it? That's why it's such an emotionally charged subject, is that she thinks you're being cruel to her. You're actually being incredibly kind because you're terrified of her hurting someone and getting into trouble even.
Hurting herself, having an accident, and these little things, they add up, don't they?
They do.
When you look at them, and I was thinking, that would have never happened, that would have never happened before, that would have never... Because she was a superb driver.
Yeah, but also that idea that it's not her fault. It's not her fault things have gone wrong. It's the roads that have changed. That was never a one-way before. That was never a 50. That was never a 50. That was. I'm driving on the roads that were around in 1978, not the roads that are around. Oh dear. Oh, and I snorted at the. For which I should probably apologise. It's very unprofessional of me, but the bit about trying to fib on the form, because that's the perfect distillation of the gulf between the person concerned about the parent, or in this case the parent-in-law, the mother-in-law, and the mother-in-law, because driving is weird. It is. We talked about this in the context of road rage. It is not the simple mechanical process that non-petrol heads like me see it as. It's an extension of your personality, and in this case of your freedom. So when you take that away, as Julie's mother-in-law said, you are doing something significant, shall we say. Quite a few people are in this position at the moment. Frank's been in touch. My parents didn't exert much authority over us. I was a good-natured kid. When I moved out, this continued, and now for the first time, one of us is going to have to take on an authority role to deal with this, and I've got no idea how that works. Well, hopefully you'll get some ideas, or you'll get some
some guidance on this one. And here it is, the one I told you about. This is from Colin in Edinburgh. I told my dad, who was 81 at the time, that he was becoming dangerous and that he should no longer be driving. His reply to me was that if I ever bring this subject up again, he will disinherit me and my children. What am I supposed to do about that? Well, I mean, the holier-than-thou answer is that you prioritise the safety of your father and any other potential road users he might hurt in an accident over your own financial well-being. But how many of us would actually do that in the same circumstances as Colin? I do not know. Rob's in Stockport. Rob, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. Thanks for having me on.
You're very welcome.
Had to have this conversation about 10 years ago with my dad.
Oh.
He'd suffered night seizures for a few times, and this is because of his diet. He'd cut salt out of his diet, so his sodium levels would drop, and he'd have seizures.
Gosh.
And we had to sit him down, me and my mum, and say, look, you know, if this happens when you're behind the wheel, you're either going to kill yourself or you're going to kill somebody else.
Yeah.
And his
What did
reaction,
he say? What would he say in that moment? What was his...
He said, no, you might as well cut my legs off. If you take my car away, I can't get anywhere.
Yeah.
And eventually, you know, we
this
we
is
kept
tough,
having
mate,
the
isn't it?
conversation.
This is really tough.
Because it's independence. You know, I mean, he's 83 now, so this is when he was in his mid-70s. And all because of his diet.
Yeah.
So
he's all there mentally. He's as fit as a fiddle in other ways, but he's just got this condition that means he can't... So he's driving fine. It's just what would happen if he had a seizure mid-drive, as it were.
Yeah, exactly. And his consultant said, we recommend that you stop driving. They didn't actually force him to stop.
Right.
But so then that decision comes to us, and my mum was like, well, I don't feel safe. And he was like, right, okay. But yeah, it's really tough.
And he took it in the end, did he? Or was he? I mean, was he furious even as he went along with it?
Yeah, well, I drove him down to the post office when he was posting his licence back, you know, surrendering it.
Gosh.
And the look on his face, honestly, he was heartbroken.
And so were you?
Yeah, because I had to do that. And it was like, oh, God, I'm adulting. I'm adulting my own parent.
That's the word, isn't it? The verb. And
Yeah.
it's the only time you do it. And hopefully it's the only time you do it. Obviously, if things like dementia kick in, then there's going to be a whole lot more of that kind of conduct. But generally speaking, it's the only time you're ever really going to have to lay down the law for a parent.
That phrase, he said, you might as well cut my legs off because I'm not going to be able to get anywhere.
Yeah.
However, you know, the local council do a ring and ride service, and, you know, he's out and about. He's never at home.
He still hasn't forgiven you, that's why.
Yeah,
well, that's nice to know, because you worry about public transport as well not being up to sniff, don't you?
Yeah, and I mean, his mobility is deteriorated over the years, but, you know, we have friends. Obviously, he's got us, you know, and we'll take them out, we'll see them. But yeah,
so it wasn't the end of his life as he. Well, that's another thing that might be helpful to people listening. It wasn't the sort of apocalyptic cessation of independence that he thought it was going to be. Whether or not you can get Colin's dad on side without disinheriting the entire family, only time will tell. But also driverless cars are just around the corner. They're already here in some contexts, but I don't know whether or not the technology is yet close to being at a place where a non-driver could hop in a driverless car and get ferried around the place. A power of attorney is the ultimate thing that you do when you want to assume the role of authority over your parents, but that is generally going to be in much more serious circumstances than simple concerns about driving. And yeah, I mean, as Rob said, the consultant advised against it, but it's not one of the things that gets filed in law as being an absolute deal breaker for driving. Same with chemotherapy. So two experiences there, both of which are suboptimal but not actually legally prohibited. It's coming out to 12:30. Amelia Cox is here now with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
32. I mean, I found things to giggle at in some of the stories that we've heard, elements, but there's nothing funny about this one. Dear James, on the subject of older people driving, my granddad is 88, and every day I hate watching him get in his car. He's become a terrible driver in his later years. He's almost completely deaf, medically. His eyesight isn't great. His spatial awareness is appalling, and we're all terrified that he's not only going to kill himself driving, but also someone else. Collectively, as a family, we've tried everything to intervene, but you can't physically stop someone. Personally, I think that after 65, there should be mandatory refresher lessons or a course that's taken every 5 years to make sure you're still capable of driving safely, with the instructor able to make the call to remove your licence. I also believe that a doctor should be able to recommend a driver's licence be revoked on medical grounds, and it shouldn't be left to the person to report this to the DVLA. I have nothing but sympathy for your situation. However, everyone else getting in touch with the programme has found a way to do the thing you say you can't do, which is simply an observation, not an admonishment or a criticism. It is simply an admonishment. And then on messages like this, the insistence with which some people are demanding that I don't reveal their names is quite funny, because it means that you think they're listening to the programme and that they might be able to work out, I won't say your name. My older sister should not be driving. Accidents, damage caused. Her friends agree and will not accept lifts from her. You'd think that would be a clue. I've discussed this with her, James, but she disagrees. She depends on her car, living in the countryside. Her daughter avoids saying this and says only her mum can judge if she's driving safely. It's made me take an extra driving lesson to check I'm still okay. I am, but I'll do it again as I get older, and I've asked my sons to let me know if they think I'm unsafe. Oh, Carol Ann is in Thetford. That's three of my favourite... Well, I like Thetford. No offence to Thetford, Carol Ann, but whenever I drive through Thetford, it means I'm almost at the nice place that I'm on my way to.
It is a lovely place.
It is a lovely... The forest is lovely. The forest is lovely, of course.
Yes.
What made you pick up the phone today?
Well, it must have been about... my father died...
I'm sorry.
About 5 years ago, but prior to that... he had 3 incidents, shall we say, where the 6 of us sat down and went, "You've got to stop driving, Dad. This can't go on." And he managed to have an accident on the A12 and completely blocked the A12 for about 5 hours.
Before I tried to see the funny side of that, was everyone okay?
Everyone's okay.
Right.
He never actually hurt anyone.
Okay.
And he never hurt himself.
But, I mean, it was quite a serious accident or collision if he managed to shut the entire A12 for 5 hours.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, one side of it, anyway, yeah.
Oh, well, that's all right then.
He then took the car up a very high curb and broke both tyres, because so God knows what speed he was going at, on that side.
Yeah.
And then my youngest brother helped him buy another car.
Why? If everyone was worried, is he the black sheep? Is he the black sheep of the family, Caroline?
Yes, he is.
Yeah, he's the... Yeah, all right, say no more. So he goes out, helps Dad buy a new car.
Dad gets in it for the first time to come over for Sunday lunch to myself and my sister, and puts his foot on the wrong... It was an automatic. He put his foot on the wrong... He's put his foot on the brake. He went straight into a wall and wrote off the next door lady's car.
Wow. Was that the point where he decided it was time to hang up his car keys?
Well, it was that was the point where we all went, "You can't do this anymore."
Yeah.
I mean, it was sad. It was really sad because, we did have tears.
Was he angry? Or was he...
No, he was upset, which upset us.
Yeah, of course.
I mean, he'd been a driver in the army, he'd been a cab driver, he'd been a delivery driving had been his life.
Okay.
And it was really sad. However, he then went out and got himself one of those mobile motorbike things.
What, a mobility scooter?
That's it.
Yeah.
That was the word.
Not a motorbike.
And,
that would have been out of the frying pan and into the fire, Caroline.
I couldn't think of the word.
No, that's all right.
I wonder if I should be driving.
A nice mobility scooter.
Yeah. And he was going shopping down Bethnal Green High Street, because, we're from the East End, and he managed to take out all the tables and chairs outside a cafe.
Okay, yeah. So, I mean, God, that's another phone in for another day, when you had to take away the keys to your parents' mobility scooter. That's cruel, isn't it?
I know.
Oh, days. Oh, well, I mean, in a way, as you say, no one got hurt. You know, a bit of damage to a table and a chair. But goodness me, it's an escalation, isn't it, of circumstances. Everyone's going to recognise this who's been through something similar. I've not seen my inbox this busy in a very, very long time. Here's another. Thank you, Carol-Ann. Take care. If you choose to read this, do not say my name. That is imperative. It's such a good subject to broach, James, because hardly anyone discusses it. I nearly said your name then in saying, thank you very much. How kind of you to point that out. Hang on, let me make sure I've got the right message before I start insisting on people's anonymity. My elderly mother is extremely stubborn, generally, about ageing, and it's impossible to challenge her. However gently and kindly and respectfully we try about her stopping driving. Her eyesight is getting rather bad in one eye, and she insists that she has passed the racing driving test, the one for elderly people to prove they can still drive, but I'm not sure I believe that she actually took it. She can see well enough, but it really concerns me that in one eye she can't see at all well at close range, and everyone, when you're driving, obviously you need to be able to see everything. A couple of times we've been in the car with her when the front car door wasn't shut properly and it swung open while she was driving along. OK, it's not ideal. I was extremely scared and concerned. Although nothing bad happened, it was a huge concern as it could happen again on a busier road than the ones it has happened on before. I get so scared that she could put herself or others at risk, I have to resort to gentle humour, saying, don't do a Prince Philip. Well, you're giving quite a few clues to your mum here that you didn't want her to. Don't do a Prince Philip and be so stubborn. Please be sensible and stop driving soon, but she won't talk about it. She won't remain calm, and she bats away any discussion that we try to have. She used to be an excellent driver, and she loves her little run around, doesn't use it that often, but when she does, it really concerns me. And there is the problem, you see. The idea that the adult offspring has to become the adult in this case. And as you say, I have a huge sense of conscience and common sense and mortality. I feel I will be compelled at some stage to intervene. I think you can report it anonymously to the DVLA if you're very, very concerned. Pierre is in Arundel. Pierre, what would you like to say?
Yeah, hi, James. Yeah, a bit of a funny story, actually. My late father, he was in his late 80s, and we decided, my brothers and sisters, that his driving was so bad, we had to take the keys away from him.
Yeah.
It didn't go down very well. He was throwing his toys out the pram, etc.
But you stuck to your guns. You stuck to your guns.
Oh, absolutely. And what happened? He was coming back from France one particular week, and he had an accident, and he literally took out a whole row of cars in Wandsworth of all places. Gosh. So that was it. I said, Dad, the vehicle's coming away from you. You're not driving. You're too old. And as a child, we used to call him Mr. Magoo because his driving was absolutely appalling. So we took the car away from him, and then he disappeared for a couple of days. And he's turned up at 88. He bought a 750 motorcycle.
Oh no!
We found that in the garage. We just could not believe it. It's funny now, but at the time it was a complete nightmare.
I mean, and he'd been out on it. Well, he'd got it home at least, hadn't he?
Oh yeah, no, he rode it back from the.
So he thought, so he went along with the confiscation of the car keys because he could have gone out and bought another car, but somewhere inside he decided that was probably for the best, that he didn't drive a car anymore. So he went out and bought a powerful motorbike.
Yeah, so we got the motorcycle come back. We found the motorcycle in the garage.
Yeah.
My brother and I had to go back to the motorcycle dealer trying to get the money back. I think he lost. My father lost about £1,500 on this brand new motorcycle.
Oh, that's a bit mean of the dealer, isn't it? But I suppose they've got to.
Well, I suppose business is business. Yeah. And then that didn't go down well with father. We had literally throwing things around the room and the house, etc., etc. And then a week later, he disappeared. And then we found out that he was in France. Right. Literally, we didn't know where he disappeared to. And then 2 days later, he's arrived back with a moped. And he's ridden the moped all the way back from a place called Rouen in Normandy. So he's gone from Normandy to Dieppe on a moped. He's got onto the car ferry. And then he's come up the A23, M23 on a 50cc moped.
so we got that. Obviously, we had to confiscate the moped.
I'm beginning to feel sorry for him now. I mean, the determination that he's displaying is actually quite impressive.
Oh, James, it's funny now, but at the time...
you were all tearing your hair out. And was that the final chapter in this particular...
No, it wasn't, because about a month later he decided he wanted a mobility scooter.
Yeah.
We said, well, we can't go wrong with that, Dad.
You should have spoken to Carol Ann in Thetford, mate. Seriously, she could have set you straight. Go on, what happened?
Well, I'll tell you what happened. One particular... He had the mobility scooter for about 4 or 5 weeks, and then... I happened to pop in and see him. He wasn't in for that particular day, so took a stroll down the high street in Sutton in Surrey, and I could hear all this commotion going on. And I thought, what's going on? I could see all these buses stacking up, and I could see lorries and cars. They're all tooting. I turned round, and my father is in the middle of the road with a mobility scooter, with a basket on the front, with his pet poodle. And he's literally got all these cars and buses behind him, and he's literally putting up his 2 fingers, telling them to F off.
Oh, dear.
And in the end, I thought, you know what, I can't watch this. I had to walk away and pretend that I didn't recognise it.
Yeah, well, I can see why.
We eventually got the scooter off him in the end.
And that was it? And then he bought a pogo stick?
Well, yeah... Well, no, in fact, he died a few months after that, so it comes, you know.
But because, I mean, not to, obviously, I'm sorry for your loss, but I sense that he probably would have had another crack at something if he hadn't passed away. Because he's tried everything now. I'm trying to think what's left.
He was a Frenchman, of course, but he was so stubborn.
I mean, that is a masterclass in stubbornness. I'm just trying to think, well, what if he was still with us? What might have been the next attempt at this? Sort of moped, yep, done that. Mobility scooter, done that. Motorbike, done that. Car, done that. Absolutely. I don't think there is anything left. Unless he's sort of, I don't know, got some sort of air travel involved. Thank you, Pierre. Good Lord. And that's it, isn't it? That's what I'm trying to hit today. That blend of genuine concern with deep emotional turmoil, actually, because I can't think of any other subject like it. 12:45 is the time.
James O'Brien on LBC.
The time is 12:48. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. As you will be aware from the bulletins that have been running on this radio station throughout the morning, 5 members of the Al Jazeera staff were killed in an Israeli strike this weekend. It's been confirmed a 6th reporter not with Al Jazeera was among their number. And while we've been on air, Gazans have gathered for the funeral of the staff, dozens standing amid the bombed-out buildings in the courtyard of Al-Shifa Hospital to pay their respects to Anas al-Sharif, the most prominent of the Al Jazeera correspondents, just 28 years old, and 4 of his colleagues. We also know that Mohammed al-Kaldi, a freelance reporter, was killed in the strike that targeted the Al Jazeera team. That's according to the director of Al-Shifa Hospital, Dr. Mohammed Abu Salmiya. I'm joined now by Tamer Almisshal, who's a senior presenter at Al Jazeera Arabic in Doha and is himself Palestinian. And the detail is almost unbearable, Tamer, because it's almost as if the IDF announced their intention last month, isn't it, when Avikai Adrai, the IDF spokesperson, released a video on X and accused accused Anas of being a member of Hamas's military wing, because at the time the UN Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression called it an unsubstantiated claim and a blatant assault on journalists. I know he spoke about it himself, but did you have any inkling of how personally threatened or targeted he felt in his final weeks?
Yes. First of all, we feel sorry for the loss of our brave team in Gaza.
Of course.
And as you mentioned, they bombed not a building, they bombed a tent, the tent in the hospital, in a complex, in a destroyed complex of Shifa Hospital, the remains of a Shifa complex, the main medical complex in Gaza City, killing 4 of our colleagues and another freelancer with us, and 6 reporter, a Palestinian reporter. He was next to their tent. It is clear an assassination operation, killing our team. And the fabricated allegations against Anas it wasn't started just a week ago or 2 weeks. Since the beginning of his coverage, the allegations and fabricated allegations against Anas and other colleagues who are covering from Gaza, it has been continued all over the last 2 years. Anas joined Al Jazeera in November 2023. In that time, he was covering the siege of an Indonesian hospital in the north of Gaza Strip. And during his coverage in November 2023, he received a call by an intelligence officer, Israeli intelligence officer, threatening him to stop the coverage. He told him, we know where are you in the hospital, leave the hospital and stop the coverage. Otherwise, you will be targeted. He shut down the phone and then came out to Al Jazeera saying, I have received the threat and I will go on my coverage. I am a Palestinian journalist. I will not give up my duty. A few days later, after this threat, they bombed his house, killing his father. This was in the early months of this war. And after that, the allegations continues against Anas and all of other correspondents. Why this allegations and fabricated allegations was in the last 4 weeks? Because our brave correspondent Anas al-Sharif was with his team the only eyes from Gaza covering the starving, disaster and the genocide from Gaza to the world. And you followed the impact of their documentations and shots and reports covering the starving disaster from Gaza to the world. Because of that, they came out with these allegations and fabricated allegations and baseless accusations, which is nothing new. I will mention to you before Anas al-Sharif, these allegations. In July 2024, we had our correspondent Ismail al-Ghul, who was killed in 31st of July 2024. Ismail al-Ghul, the day after his killing, the same Israeli spokesman came out with a video claiming and putting accusing fabricated allegations against Ismail, the same allegations against Anas al-Sharif, despite that 5 months before the killing of Ismail al-Ghul, he was arrested in a Shifa hospital by the Israeli occupation forces when they invaded Gaza, and they arresting him and then they released him. How we can understand that you arrest and release, and after that you accusing him that he is a terrorist?
Because if they had evidence to back up their allegations, they could have pursued it down legal channels. I should tell you the BBC is reporting that Anas did work for a Hamas media team in Gaza before the current conflict. The idea that he had a relatively minor non-combat role with Hamas several years ago obviously doesn't fit with what the IDF claim he has been doing latterly. But I wonder what it was. What do you think?
But these allegations are fabricated. No,
well, no. This the BBC.
It's baseless. Yes,
the BBC report isn't. This is the BBC report about working for a Hamas media team is not the same as running
these
a.
Allegations not by an independent party.
The head of a terrorist cell is a very different allegation to working in a non-combat role several years ago.
By the Israeli spokesman.
No, I understand that. I'm just clarifying a development since we started talking. What I'm interested in, if I may, is what you think it was about his work that was so provocative to the Israeli administration, as opposed to all the other journalists, the ones that can report from the territory.
Because they want to hide their crimes.
Yes, but why him? What was it about his work that was so provocative compared to other Al Jazeera journalists and preferred to other journalists on the ground in Gaza?
Okay, but Anas wasn't the only one who was being targeted. We talk about more than 230 Palestinian journalists have been killed during this war. Anas is not the first one, not the only one. And we are in Al Jazeera lost now more than 6 or 7 Palestinian journalists who worked with us. We know why. If you want to ask me why they are targeting journalists, because they want to hide their crimes and not to be covered to the world. Why is Anas al-Sharif and Muhammad Iqriqi? Because they are one of the few journalists who stayed in Gaza and continued their coverage from Gaza. And Israel, for the last 2 years, they don't allow for any international journalist to be to allow for him to cover from outside. And before this war, you remember Shirin Abu Aqla in Jenin, in West Bank, not in Gaza. The same allegations, and they changed. The Israeli forces, they changed their narratives in Shirin Abu Aqla case 4 times. And in the end, we find that the Israeli sniper has committed this crime against Shirin Abu Aqla.
Why did he stay? Tell me a bit about him, if you can. After the threat had been made so clear to him personally, what was it that drew him back to the war zone?
Because he's not. He has born in a Jabalia refugee camp. This is his homeland. He worked in this place, and he has a family. He has a wife and 2 children, and he said, "This is my duty. I will keep on covering these crimes from Gaza." And his output and his documentations and shots and reports have been used by many international mainstream news, like CNN, even like BBC, other Washington Post. And he's native Palestinian. He's not an outsider.
Again, in addition to where we were earlier today, the BBC is also reporting that in some of his social media posts before his death, you can hear him, you can hear Anas al-Sharif criticising Hamas, which is, of course, itself a dangerous thing to do in Gaza itself. What is the situation now on the ground for Al Jazeera? This was, I think, your only network team in Gaza City. We know how hard it is. It's impossible for international journalists to get into the territory. The Committee to Protect Journalists has already strongly criticised the killing of Sharif and his colleagues. What have you got left in Gaza City, Tamer?
We left our other correspondents and our team. And just now we had a stand in Al Jazeera headquarters, and we listened to our reporter from Gaza, Mu'min al-Shrafi. He lost 22 of his family in this war, including his mother and father. And he said, "We will continue what Anas al-Sharif has started and others. We will not give up." And we, as Al Jazeera here, saying to all concerned parties, how many Palestinian journalists you need to be killed to intervene seriously to stop this genocide and massacre against Palestinian journalists and Palestinian civilians? We're calling for the protection of our crews. We are calling for the protection of our correspondents and for the Palestinian journalists. And I want to say, justifying the killing by fabricated allegations is additional crimes against journalism and against the freedom of speech. And our journalists continue to expose the genocide. This is their commitment and this is their role, and they are covering professionally, and they are putting, we on Al Jazeera, putting all sides on the channel, and we left the audience to judge.
Tamer Almisshal, a senior presenter at Al Jazeera Arabic in Doha. Many thanks for your time today, of course, not for the first time. The question of why Israel will not allow foreign correspondents whose names you know, colleagues here at LBC like Matt Fry, colleagues over at the BBC like Lise Doucette, many of the biggest names, for want of a better word, you know, the Jeremy Bowens, the John Simpsons, would be there in a heartbeat if they were permitted to be, and of course they are not. If you missed any of today's show, you can listen back on Catch Up on Global Player and the LBC app, where you can stay up to date on all the top stories and opinions. You can put your news categories in the order you want. You can pause and rewind live radio and listen to a range of podcasts, including the James O'Brien Daily, an hour of the best bits from my show every day. So download the official LBC app for free from your app store now. Coming up at 4 on LBC, it's Tom Swarbrick, but now it's Sheila Fogarty.
Thank you very much, James.
James O'Brien on LBC.